Hogwarts, both scientific and magical. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Conflict. The three little brats pointing at Kyle's wand was a joke in his eyes. Kyle didn't believe that the skills he had acquired through friendly exchanges with many Slytherin friends and dark wizards he met when he went out over the years would be defeated by three little kids who had just graduated from the first grade, even if they had the aura of a protagonist. But no one could remain calm when being pointed at by a gun, especially when they could easily resist. At this time, Kyle had already touched the wand, and his action increased the tension of the three Potters. Kyle. Senior Kyle, don't move. We don't want to do anything to you. We just need you to answer a few questions for us. Hermione seemed a little embarrassed at this time, but it was obvious that the friendship during the holiday was not enough to make the little witch stand on Kyle's side, and she naively persuaded Kyle not to move. Kyle wanted to laugh when he heard this. The irritable red-haired boy was about to put his wand in Kyle's face. Evil Slytherin, I've known for a long time that you are not a good guy. You usually wear a fake smile, but now your foxtail is finally exposed. Tell me, what tricks are you and the old bat doing? How are you going to steal the Philosopher's Stone? Kyle looked at the wand in front of his face coldly and ignored Weirly's threat. Instead, he clenched the wand with his right hand and prepared his left hand. Don't move. Kyle's action seemed to have aroused Gryffindor's nerves. Potter and Weirly took a step forward at the same time, as if they were about to recite a spell in the next second. Potter, how come I didn't know when you became an aura of the Ministry of Magic? Are you going to take me to Azkaban for interrogation? Kyle's sarcastic words were slow and even a little careless, but both Potter and Weirly noticed the strong murderous aura in his words. The little red-haired boy seemed a little at a loss, but Potter showed extraordinary courage. Potter took another step forward and stood side by side with Weirly. He was not afraid, but looked up and looked at Kyle. Senior Kyle, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we really have something important to confirm. I hope you can cooperate with us. If our guess is wrong, I will apologize to you. Apologize? Potter, I never need to apologize. It's been a long time since anyone dared to point a wand at me like this. Do you know why? Without waiting for Potter to answer, Kyle dodged and grabbed Weirly's wand. The shocked Weirly subconsciously recited the spell, and Potter behind him also recited the Expelliarmus. Only the little witch was anxious and screamed for the boys to calm down. But how could she calm down? Seeing Potter and Weirly reciting the spell, Kyle was not panicked, but smiled grimly. This was the expression Kyle would only show when he was friendly with his Slytherin friends. Hermione, who had never seen Kyle's fierce expression, was stunned for a moment. That's what I've been waiting for. Kyle exerted force on his hand without waiting for Weirly to finish the spell. Snap. The wand was broken into two pieces by the combined force of Kyle and Weirly. No. Weirly held his head in his hands in disbelief, but without his wand, Weirly was no longer worthy of Kyle's attention. At this time, Potter had also finished the spell Expelliarmus, but the intention of this attack was too obvious. Kyle dodged it by turning sideways and fought back with the same spell, Expelliarmus. Kyle's spell was fast and accurate, and it was obviously not something that Potter, a first-year kid, could dodge. A huge force knocked Potter out, and his wand was firmly caught in Kyle's hand. Seeing this, the little witch quickly stood in front of the two boys. Except you, Hermione. Before the little witch finished, Kyle shouted to stop her. Are you really ready to attack me? Kyle's overwhelming strength made Hermione speechless for a moment, but she still stared at him stubbornly, not giving in at all. At this time, Potter had struggled to stand up, with his glasses crooked on his face. There were a few dust stains on his body and a blood mark on his face, looking embarrassed, but he still stepped forward and stood side by side with the little witch, looking at Kyle with the same stubborn face. It seemed that Kyle was the villain of the plot. Please, Kyle was the one who was inexplicably threatened. Look, Potter, this is the way of talking that I'm familiar with. Is it okay? What are you doing? Kyle was interrupted by an angry female voice before he finished speaking. Then, Professor McGonagall came over. Extreme anger made him gasp for breath. Seeing this, Kyle put away his wand and saluted her. "Nice to meet you, Professor." McGonagall ignored Kyle, but glanced at Potter, then looked at Weirly's broken wand on the ground, and angrily questioned Kyle. "Mr. Shafiq, can you explain why you were so harsh on several first-year students, even breaking Mr. Weirly's wand?" Kyle did not directly answer Professor McGonagall's question, but threw the wand back to Potter, straightened his clothes, and then replied nonchalantly, "Professor, I actually want to know what happened. Why don't you ask your students?" Kyle's attitude made Professor McGonagall's expression pause. She did not continue to question Kyle, took a deep breath, and then suppressed her anger, and looked at the little witch. "Ms. Granger, what exactly happened here?" The little witch was speechless. Chapter 52 The story begins. Facing Professor McGonagall's questioning, Hermione hesitated and did not answer. Obviously, the little witch also realized that it was not a good reason to besiege Kyle, based on the speculation of a few people. Instead, the little red-haired man stood up indignantly and looked at Kyle with hatred. "Professor, this guy's old. Snape's helper. When we caught him, he was about to meet Snape. I didn't expect him to dare to resist. He even broke my wand. Professor, please ask him how he discussed with Snape, otherwise it will be too late and the Philosopher's Stone will be stolen by Snape." It can be seen that Weirly was really anxious. He was angry that Kyle broke his wand, and he was also anxious to prevent the Philosopher's Stone from being stolen. In this way, although the little red-haired man has a lower IQ, a lower strength, and is more reckless, rude, and prejudiced, he still has his merits. However, Weirly's words obviously made Professor McGonagall even more confused and angry. "You should call Professor Snape, Mr. Weirly. Didn't I just tell you that no one can steal the Philosopher's Stone? It is strictly protected and foolproof. What are you still arguing about? And the problem you are talking about seems to have nothing to do with my problem now. I just want to know what caused you to release magic to your classmates in the corridor." "Okay, Professor, Mr. Weirly doesn't seem to have any intention of explaining your problem. Can you allow me to talk about what I saw?" Kyle's voice was lazy and unhurried. This attitude made Potter and Weirly even more angry. But fortunately, they still had some reason. Knowing that Professor McGonagall was watching, they just looked at him with gritted teeth and did not do anything. "Professor, just like Mr. Weirly said just now, they seem to suspect that my dean is going to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and I'm an accomplice. By the way, Gryffindor will be deducted 10 points for disrespecting the professor. Professor McGonagall, do you agree to this deduction?" "Of course, Mr. Shafiq. Gryffindor will be deducted 10 points. Kyle's words undoubtedly angered Professor McGonagall, but Kyle didn't care. Listen to what Professor McGonagall just said. "The Philosopher's Stone is strictly protected." What does this mean? First, the Philosopher's Stone is not carried by Dumbledore. Otherwise what McGonagall said should be that the Philosopher's Stone is carried by Dumbledore. Second, the matter of the Philosopher's Stone was not arranged by Dumbledore on his own initiative. At least some of the teachers in the school knew about it. Haha, what a magic school. This is a school built together with a bank vault, teaching students and providing valuable storage services for guests. The teacher is also interesting, not only a teacher who teaches students, but also a part-time security guard in the vault. I just don't know what the role of students is in the eyes of these teachers, both students and insignificant cannon fodder. Ignoring Professor McGonagall's angry expression, Kyle continued, "Thank you, Professor. Following up on what I said just now, Potter and this Mr. Weirly seem to think that I'm the dean's accomplice and want to steal the Philosopher's Stone, so they actually threatened me with their wands. It seems that if I don't say something, the two gentlemen will not let me go. Is that so, Potter? Don't listen to this cunning Sly. Don't interrupt me. Potter, you answer." Before the red-haired man could finish his words, Professor McGonagall glared at him fiercely, then stared at Potter, waiting for his answer. "It's not what he said. We just want to ask him a few questions." "Ask," with a wand pointed at him. Kyle sneered at the side. Professor McGonagall understood the general process and her face looked anxious. Mr. Shafiq, even if the Potters were a little impulsive, didn't you go too far? Why did you break Mr. Weasley's wand? Unfortunately, McGonagall's attitude didn't scare Shafiq. I don't think I was impulsive, Professor. After all, you know that among all the people who dared to point their wands at me, their results were already the best. Unlike his careless and lazy look just now, Kyle's expression was extremely cold at this time, and he stared at McGonagall without giving in. In the end, McGonagall was defeated. Mr. Shafiq, I know your situation. I have no right to interfere with your choice, but I hope you can have more kindness towards the world in the future. McGonagall's response to Kyle's bad attitude was not anger, but a kind advice. McGonagall's words made Kyle silent. Kyle also wanted to enjoy the magic and happiness of studying in a magic school, but unfortunately he came to Hogwarts without anyone to rely on, and he was admitted to Slytherin, where blood discrimination was the most serious, which forced him to arm himself. During the first period of time, when he first entered school, Kyle relied on his determination to bite off a piece of flesh from his opponent, rather than have his leg broken. You know, at that time, whenever there was a fight, it was either a group of Slytherins fighting Kyle alone, or Kyle fighting a group of Slytherins. The only thing Kyle could do was to make sure that his target was more miserable than he was, and that was considered a victory. This situation continued until Kyle got the second level Expelliarmus and armor, and beat the first year kid to tears. In fact, Kyle's mentality was a little unbalanced today. After all, the cave was left by Voldemort, and no one knew if there were other dangers. To give a simple example, if the cave could not prevent creature from apparating away, but could prevent creature from apparating with others, what would Kyle do? This was also the reason why Kyle offended Professor McGonagall today. As for breaking Weasley's wand, this was Kyle's normal operation. Kyle always believed that, if you dare to do something on the first day, I will dare to do it on the 15th. Even worse, if you dare to light a lamp, I will dare to set it on fire. Kyle is a complicated person. Although he follows the principle of give me a peach, I will repay you with a jade. But can he still take revenge in the 9th life? Even in the 100th life, it is possible. The words small-minded, meticulous, and vindictive are not exaggerated to describe Kyle. But this does not mean that Kyle is a bad person with pus on his head and sores on his feet. He just doesn't want to get hurt. Professor McGonagall's kindness instantly reminded him of the professor's protection of him in the past few years. He didn't want to continue to be aggressive with the professor, so he simply put his hands on his chest and stopped talking. Professor McGonagall also stopped dwelling on Kyle and poured out her anger on Potter and others. Potter, I thought I had warned you not to get involved in this matter again. Snape is a teacher at the school. Both I and Professor Dumbledore trust him very much. I don't know where you heard the news from, but you obviously came to the wrong conclusion. I repeat again, even if Professor Dumbledore is not in school, the Philosopher's Stone is still well protected. It can't be stolen by anyone. Now, I don't care what you think. Just go back to the lounge. Don't let me see you wandering around the castle again. Potter and his companions were like trembling fledglings under McGonagall's aura. Even though they looked unwilling, they still didn't dare to say another word. They could only glare at Kyle unhappily and leave one after another. The little red-haired boy held his broken wand with a sad face, as if thinking about whether it could be used if it was glued together with tape. Several little devils turned around and left obediently, but Kyle did not move. Just after Professor McGonagall finished speaking, Kyle closed his eyes in disappointment. The deans of the 4 colleges, Snape, McGonagall, Flitwick and Sprout, were actually all very nice to Kyle. The deans of the other 3 colleges, except Snape, had favored him either explicitly or implicitly, and were all very attentive to his questions. They would give him detailed answers, whether in or outside the textbooks, and list books for reference. Although Professor Snape never spoke harshly to Kyle, he silently took on all the pressure outside the school for him, and provided him with the greatest protection. This was also the reason why Kyle broke Weasley's wand directly. Old Bat, I hope this lesson can make the little red hair forget this nickname. Otherwise Kyle doesn't mind breaking it again. Seeing that the 3 Potters had gone away, Professor McGonagall also turned around and left. Kyle hesitated for a moment, but still said, "Professor McGonagall, please wait a moment." Kyle's tone had calmed down at this time, no longer as tough as before. "Anything else, Mr. Shafiq?" "Professor, did you just say that Headmaster Dumbledore is not in school?" "Yes, Kyle. Do you have anything to ask him?" "Professor Dumbledore is a very great wizard, and he is very busy. His time is precious, and he cannot always stay in school." McGonagall's words made Kyle silent again, until McGonagall showed obvious impatience, and then Kyle continued, "If that's the case, Professor, I hope you can go to the corridor restricted area on the 3rd floor to take a look. The little lions of Gryffindor are not obedient children." Kyle's words made McGonagall's face change suddenly. Without waiting for Kyle to say goodbye, she turned around and strode towards the restricted area on the 3rd floor. Seeing this, Kyle thought about it and turned back to the lounge. The 7th year Slytherin prefect was chatting with his companions on the sofa at this time. Kyle walked directly in front of him. "Prefect Parker, can you please call the Slytherin students back to the lounge?" "Kyle, what happened?" Parker saw Kyle's bad face and became serious as well, as if he suddenly thought of something. "Is it the dark wizard in the Forbidden Forest that Malfoy mentioned? I don't know the specific situation, but the school may not be safe this afternoon." Kyle's words made Parker silent for a while, and finally chose to believe Kyle, believing that he would not joke about such things. "Puce, Bardock." Parker summoned the prefects in the lounge and several students who usually performed well. "Everyone, gather the students of your respective grades in the lounge, immediately, right now." The 7th year prefect's words were very stern, and the little snakes who were good at judging the situation did not refute and all followed his orders. "Thank you for your trust, Parker," Kyle said to Parker. "Kyle, I hope your information is accurate. You know what you are doing." "Of course, Prefect. I don't want to be in trouble with the Dean. I also don't want anyone to cause trouble to the Dean." After saying that, Kyle made a slight gesture to a few people and returned to his dormitory. Kyle, who could not fulfill his promise today, wrote a note to Creature and sent his owl to Creature. Then he took his box and returned to the lounge. Less than half an hour later, the lounge was full of people. "Kyle, these are all the people we can find in a short time, but there are a few guys who don't know where they are hiding, so we can't notify them." Without Kyle asking, Parker told Kyle the situation. Kyle nodded, walked to the handrail of the stairs, and looked down at the little snakes. These little snakes also knew that it was Kyle who summoned them. They looked at him quietly, waiting for his explanation. "Everyone, please forgive me for not being able to elaborate on the current situation, but I'm very sure that the Dark Wizard in the Forbidden Forest will take action today. So, for your own safety and to avoid causing trouble for our dear Dean, please stay in the lounge today and don't walk around. Thank you." After saying that, Kyle ignored the reactions of the little snakes, walked down the stairs, and sat on an empty sofa. He held the wand tightly in his right hand, thinking about what happened today. Why did Kyle so arbitrarily let Parker summon the Slytherin students back to the lounge? Wasn't he afraid of making a big mistake? In fact, this decision was also the result of Kyle's careful consideration. Think about this time point. The day after the exam is very likely to be the end of the first plot of the storybook, which is the best time for the final plot to happen. Now thinking back, Potter and the other two were also walking towards the 3rd floor just now, and they were obviously preparing to go to the restricted area to find out. In addition, the most powerful guardian of Hogwarts happened to be away from school, and the Dark Wizards would become more unscrupulous. It was these reasons that made Kyle believe that the first plot he had been waiting for was about to begin. Just as Kyle was sitting on the sofa thinking about this, a huge roar was heard in the lounge. Sure enough, something went wrong. This thought came to the minds of all the little wizards, and everyone looked at Kyle in unison, but Kyle's face did not change at all. "Don't worry, the lounges of each college are protected by powerful magic, and no one can threaten here." Although he comforted the little wizards, Kyle's hand holding the wand became more forceful. Is Voldemort really here? Such a huge movement, which can be transmitted to the cellar through layers of walls, is not something that a weak person can do. Could it be that Voldemort has been resurrected? The 7 Harry Potter books are really about the story of Voldemort being resurrected 7 times and then killed 7 times? And is his own dean an accomplice of Voldemort? Although Kyle trusts Snape very much, thinking about Potter's firm confirmation at the time that it was the dean who wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone, there must be some evidence. The lounge is safe, but the protective magic of the lounge will not prevent the Slytherin dean from entering. Click. All the little snakes looked at the door of the lounge. Although they were discussing what happened in a low voice, the little snakes did not forget to pay attention to the door. The door opened, and Snape came in. The dean's clothes were covered with dust and there were some scratches on his body. His expression was unprecedentedly cold. Thanks to Hansi Cheyenne Iron. Waitings, you know Sora, Weeking, Shuiao 202003141211501177, Xiao Pangbu Diet, and a doo-doo for their recommendations. Chapter 53, The Critical Hit of the Plot. Snape, who pushed the door open, looked extremely embarrassed, covered in dust, and his arms were stained with blood. Seeing that the lounge was crowded, he was startled at first, and then his expression relaxed a little. Everyone, gather in the hall and act immediately. After giving the order with a stern face, he called Parker and Kyle. Parker, are all the people in the college here? No, Dean. A few students may be in the practice room, or on a date, and they were not notified. Parker's words made Snape startled, and the good mood that had just risen disappeared again. Waving his hand, indicating Parker to organize the students, the professor turned his eyes to Kyle. Did you notify Parker? Although the professor used a question, his tone was very affirmative. Yes, Professor, how is your injury? Snape glared at Kyle, did not answer his question, but continued to ask, what did you guess? The professor looked embarrassed, but his tone was still tough. Kyle, who was about to ask questions, could only honestly tell Snape the little information he knew. There is a dark wizard who wants to steal the Philosopher's Stone hidden in the restricted area on the 3rd floor. The dark wizard is suspected to be a Death Eater. After hearing the first half of the sentence, Snape's face looked better, but unfortunately, Kyle's words later made his face as dark as the bottom of a pot. Peering at Snape's expression, Kyle hesitated for a moment, and then said, or the Dark Lord himself invaded Hogwarts. Snape, whose face was already dark, instantly widened his eyes and subconsciously tightened his wand. Snape's reaction also made Kyle's heart sink. Is it really that Voldemort has resurrected and made a comeback? And Voldemort is so tough? He went to Hogwarts for the first time after his resurrection? Is Voldemort, who broke into Dumbledore's lair, dead? If not, the wizarding world will not be peaceful next time. If he died in Hogwarts this time, will he be resurrected next year? Is it true that Harry Potter has resurrected 7 times in 7 years? Withstanding Snape's pressure, Kyle asked, Professor, is the Dark Lord dead? Kyle still wanted to confirm whether the Dean and others had left Voldemort behind. However, Kyle's words made Snape feel relieved. It seems that this child is just guessing and doesn't know the current situation of the Dark Lord. But this is reasonable. Most people in the magic world believe that the Dark Lord is dead. It is already very good for this child to have this suspicion. Thinking of this, although Snape didn't want to waste time with Kyle, he would reluctantly answer, of course he is dead. You don't have to think too much. Go to the hall with other classmates. After that, he ignored Kyle and walked to the door of the lounge, ready to escort the little snakes all the way to the hall. Snape, who answered Kyle's question and left, didn't see Kyle's face when he heard the answer and was extremely embarrassed. It's over. I didn't expect that. I really guessed it. The plot is really that Voldemort is resurrected once a year and then killed once a year. Fortunately, Snape couldn't hear Kyle's voice, otherwise he would have sprayed a mouthful of blood on Kyle's face. This is the disadvantage of Hogwarts' exam not testing reading comprehension. The two of them were completely talking at cross purposes, and there was no signal at all. Snape's answer made Kyle feel very upset. Old Voldemort's tossing and turning completely disrupted his plan. He wanted to spend the last few years in Hogwarts steadily, and when all the useful books in the library were used up by his girlfriend, he would find a corner to hide and do his own research. No matter how he made a fuss in the wizarding world, it would not interfere with him. After all, there was Dumbledore and Harry Potter. to attract firepower in front of him. So how could old Voldemort care about a small shrimp like him? But plans can't keep up with changes. If Voldemort resurrected once a year and came to Hogwarts to date Potter and old Dumbledore once a year, would Kyle still be able to spend the last few years in the library steadily? What is this? The magic version of My Mother Loves Me Again? Or is it old Dumbledore who loves me again? The confused Kyle was no longer able to complain and even felt desperate about the plot that would happen in the next few years. In the first year, old Dumbledore hid the Philosopher's Stone, which attracted the resurrected Voldemort, and then Voldemort was crushed. The second year is a Chamber of Secrets. The resurrected Voldemort found a Chamber of Secrets and invited Dumbledore and Potter to play a room escape game, but unfortunately they were defeated again. In the third year, he found that he could not beat Dumbledore and Potter alone, so he returned to Azkaban to bring his old comrades to avenge Dumbledore and Potter, but unfortunately he was defeated again. Kyle has not thought about the plot of the fourth year, but it is inseparable from the Goblet of Fire. Could it be that Voldemort, after learning from his mistakes, mobilized his connections to reactivate the Goblet of Fire, organized the Triwizard Tournament, and then personally went down to play the Gatekeeper boss, but was defeated again? This idea is just Kyle's self-entertainment idea. After all, the Triwizard Tournament involves 3 schools and 3 ministries of magic. It is not so easy to restart, but at least the plot of the first 3 years should be almost the same. I just don't know if J.K. Rowling worked at Foxconn in her previous life. Otherwise, how could Voldemort's working mode be so similar to Foxconn? The old friend quit Foxconn and went to Lanxiang to learn technology. Lanxiang graduates are assigned jobs, but it's still Foxconn. My old friend quit Foxconn again to study technology at New Oriental. New Oriental provides job assignment, while Foxconn makes soup. My old friend quit Foxconn for the third time to study martial arts at Wudang. After graduating from Wudang, he provides job assignment, while Foxconn works as a gatekeeper. Do you think this operation model is exactly the same as the plot speculated by Kyle? I really don't know whether this poem was copied from J.K. Rowling's plot, or whether J.K. Rowling copied this poem when writing the book. Speaking of which, Voldemort is also stubborn. He really just stares at Dumbledore and Potter to death. But it's also because Hogwarts only teaches magic, so Voldemort did not receive a comprehensive education in morality, intelligence, physical fitness and aesthetics at an important stage of adolescent mental development. If he could read more books and study politics and history, he would not be so ignorant of the enemy's advance and our retreat, and the countryside surrounding the city. If you can't beat Dumbledore in the UK, won't you go to harm France? At worst, you can go and cause trouble to second-rate magic countries like Romania. Kyle, who had already given up hope on the plot, walked all the way to the hall, complaining in his heart. He even thought of the name of Potter's future memoir, which was called My 7-Year Itch with Voldemort. If someone writes a book about Voldemort in the future, the name would be easy to come up with, so it would be called My 7 Years of Revenge. In fact, think about it, Voldemort still suffered from the lack of education. Look at Duke Xiang of Qi, didn't he take revenge after 9 generations? If Voldemort had made 9 Horcruxes at that time, maybe he would have succeeded in revenge in the 9th year. J.K. Rowling is also stupid. If you write a few more Horcruxes, wouldn't you be able to write a few more books? Kyle, who was helpless, followed the group to the hall and was almost stunned by the scenery in front of him. How could such a big hole of mine disappear? Voldemort, you are too unkind. You are a dignified Dark Lord, and you cast a spell on my hall before you die, so that it can run away. Thanks to you, no Sora, Waitinks, the Wind Rider of the Sword of Swift Wind, Yi Shen Leng Yun, Hun Zhi Shan Yun, Azuan X, Qiu Zhi Huang Nao, Hishi, and Gui Li Zhe for their recommendation votes. Thanks to the Wind Rider of the Sword of Swift Wind for their monthly votes. Thanks to Wei King and Nian Zio Fan for their awards. Chapter 54 Termination of the Transaction. There is a traitor. Not only was Kyle confused at this moment, but all the students who came to the auditorium were staring at the auditorium in a daze. How come the auditorium was still in good condition during lunch? The dining table still had legs, the decorations on the wall were still colorful, and the chandelier on the ceiling was still gorgeous. How come my auditorium has changed after not seeing it for a few hours? A huge hole was blown out in the wall between the corridor and the auditorium, and the ground was full of rubble. The auditorium was in a mess, as if a hurricane had hit. Broken tables and chairs fell to the ground in a mess, and the flags of the 4 colleges that were originally hung high on the back wall fell to the ground like rags. Sharp-eyed Kyle also saw some blood on the ground. The amount of blood on the ground was not low. Usually, when students came out of the dormitory, the auditorium was the only way to go to several classrooms. Judging from the situation, more than Snape was injured. I don't know if this blood was left by the injured professors who besieged Voldemort, or by Voldemort and his men. That's right. Kyle still thinks that there were 2 people who invaded Hogwarts this time. One of them was lurking in the school to investigate the information of the Philosopher's Stone, while Voldemort himself was hiding in the Forbidden Forest waiting for the opportunity. As for the battle just now, Kyle was not very clear. Since Voldemort was killed, Dumbledore must have appeared. But Kyle couldn't guess whether Dumbledore rushed back at the critical moment or had been hiding secretly waiting for Voldemort to take the bait before showing up. Looking at the tragic scene in the hall, Kyle shrank his head and was a little confused. The battle in the first year in the storybook should not be so big. Looking at the current situation, this matter is obviously a big deal. Kyle didn't know whether the school would be closed or not. After all, there was only one school in the whole of Britain, and it would not be closed easily. But could Dumbledore still keep his position as the principal? I don't know if any students were injured. If any young wizards were injured, Kyle felt that it would be difficult for Dumbledore to get through the current hurdle. After the Daily Prophet exposed this news, wouldn't Dumbledore be drowned by the Howlers? But if Dumbledore was driven out of the position of the headmaster, how would J.K. Rowling write the story afterwards? Would Harry Potter, a little kid who had not graduated, confront Voldemort head-on? Or would the stories in the postscript books mainly focus on what happened during the holidays? Or would Dumbledore make a brilliant appearance at a critical moment in each book and crush Voldemort? Since he just learned that Voldemort died in Hogwarts again, Kyle's mind has not stopped, but unfortunately he can't figure it out. Helpless Kyle began to recall his behavior. If the butterfly effect he brought was excluded, how would the plot develop? At present, it seems that the only intersection between Kyle and the plot is the encounter with the protagonist group and Professor McGonagall in the corridor. Excluding my influence, what should the plot be like? Kyle tried to analyze. If there had not been that encounter, Potter and his friends should have arrived at the corridor on the 3rd floor earlier. Weasley's wand would not be broken, and he could provide great help to Potter. Thinking about Weasley's grades and performance, it should be able to provide. Kyle thought uncertainly. At the same time, without Kyle's reminder, Professor McGonagall. Hiss. Thinking of this, Kyle couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. If Kyle hadn't reminded them, wouldn't Potter and his little brats have to face Voldemort alone? How did they crush Voldemort and his minions? Could it be that Voldemort and his Death Eaters are made of glass and break at the touch? This explanation is totally untenable. Can a glass man turn such a big hole into a broken hall? But how did they do it? Dumbledore has been following Potter invisibly, and at the critical moment, he appeared as a hero to crush the evil duo? This doesn't make sense. If Dumbledore has always been there, why was there little movement in the previous life? But in this life, with the addition of Professor McGonagall as a new force, and even Professor Snape took action, it became a big deal. Unless, hiss. Think about what the detective drama in the previous life said. Excluding all impossible situations, the rest, no matter how unbelievable, is the fact. Could it be that Professor Snape is actually an insider? Voldemort and his Death Eaters confronted Dumbledore head-on, and Professor Snape was secretly holding back and shooting from behind. And it seems that the professor is very good at shooting from behind. Voldemort has been defeated again, but the professor has not been exposed yet. This is quite amazing. This conjecture instantly occupied Kyle's mind, and he couldn't get rid of it, no matter how he tried. No wonder Potter and the other 2 believed that the dean wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone. No wonder Professor Snape looked so embarrassed when Kyle asked him whether Voldemort was dead or not. No wonder Dumbledore, who had a smooth sailing in the story of his previous life, made such a big fuss in this life that he couldn't end it. I didn't expect that Professor Snape, you with thick eyebrows, big eyes and hooked nose, was actually a traitor. This caught Kyle off guard and his heart was extremely complicated. After all, this is a fairy tale. The main plot must be that the prince defeated the devil, saved the princess, and then lived happily with the princess. Snape followed Voldemort, and he would definitely not have a good ending. But now Dumbledore's good situation has been destroyed by the professor, and he may even be driven out of his own nest. Obviously, the storyline has been fanned astray by Kyle, this little butterfly. Will Voldemort finally turn the tables? No, Voldemort will definitely fail. This is not because justice will surely defeat evil. This is because Voldemort's brain is really not working well. Just because he doesn't even understand strategic transfer, how can he crush Dumbledore, who knows how to be invisible and self-support, and flash to cut the C position? Thinking about it this way, why do you think Dumbledore deserves the title of Voldemort? Thinking about this clearly, Kyle made up his mind in an instant. He must persuade the dean to return to the old Dumbledore's camp. A meal of kindness should be repaid with a spring of water. The dean has protected me for 3 years. Now it's my turn to help the dean. Kyle, who has sorted out his thoughts, knows what he should do. He must pull the dean off Voldemort's broken ship. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55 Dumbledore's Speech. Think about Voldemort. So what if he has 7 lives? He was killed by a trick of Dumbledore. Moreover, Kyle has seen many villains with many lives, and which one was not killed by the protagonist again and again? Take Super Mario for example. There are 8 levels in total, and the boss has 8 lives. Wasn't he killed 8 times by Mario to get the princess back? After understanding these, Kyle became more determined to save Snape. It seemed that he instantly understood the mood of an old father, who does not ask for anything in return, but only wants his children to be well. With this thought in mind, Kyle bravely walked towards Snape. Dean, can I bother you for a moment? The professor, who was counting the number of students, was obviously a little impatient, but he still walked aside with Kyle with a dark face. Professor, the battle just now was from the corridor on the 3rd floor to the auditorium. Kyle asked nonsense, and it was obvious that Snape thought so too. Nonsense. Snape just commented and stopped talking, but looked at Kyle threateningly. Obviously, if he didn't have anything important, the professor was ready to spray. Professor, I want to ask if I can go over there and take a look. Maybe I can find something. Also, is there anything you need me to deal with? I'd be happy to help you deal with it. Kyle looked at the professor sincerely, hinting wildly in his words. Professor, have you not dealt with anything that would expose your identity? Tell me, I'll help you deal with it. Kyle's words made Snape a little suspicious. What's wrong with this kid? Why is he suddenly so proactive? Does he also have ideas about the Philosopher's Stone? Suddenly, the professor's heart moved. Thinking of Kyle asking about his injuries just now, Snape felt warm in his heart. After so many years, he didn't expect that a student would care about him in the end. Is he afraid that his blood will be collected by the enemy and cursed? Thinking of this, the professor's expression eased, but his tone was still full of impatience. Mr. Shafiq, you don't need to worry about these useless things, and I have anticipated this situation, and have cast a spell in advance to deal with it. In addition, go back to the Slytherin team. I hope your brain can understand that staying in the hall honestly and not causing trouble is the greatest help to me. Although Snape's tone was still bad, he still tactfully told Kyle not to worry. He had cast an anti-curse magic in advance, and the scattered blood, hair, etc. could not be the source of the curse. After speaking, without waiting for Kyle to reply, he had already thrown his robe and walked towards Professor McGonagall, leaving Kyle with a rolling back in a black robe. After hearing this, Kyle also relaxed in his heart. Professor Snape is worthy of being an old undercover in Hogwarts for many years. Before thinking about victory, think about defeat first. Before taking action, he had already thought of countermeasures and cast magic. Even if the action failed, he could be so sure that there was absolutely no evidence of dragging down and shooting from behind. Kyle could only say admiration. Kyle, who had figured out the plot and realized that there was no danger in front of him, completely relaxed. He began to look around and observe other people. After all, the little snakes in Slytherin knew the news in advance, and they were very calm. They even saw the little badgers and little lions looking anxious, and they even wanted to laugh at them. The little eagles in Ravenclaw made Kyle look sideways. It stands to reason that they should not have received the news in advance, but they were also very calm, standing quietly in the corner without any panic. The deans of the 4 colleges and professors of other subjects all came to the hall. The professors of herbology and astronomy were very friendly female professors. They were comforting the anxious little badgers and little lions. The other 3 deans and other professors stood outside the students on alert, with cold, serious and sad expressions. No, not all professors were there. Quirrell, who taught the defense against the dark arts class, was not there. Thinking about Loki's hidden dark magic ability, could he be a Death Eater lurking in Hogwarts? Dumbledore was really old and had his eyes blurred. He personally interviewed a Death Eater to join the school. It seemed that he was in even bigger trouble. In addition, Madame Pomfrey from the hospital wing was no longer here. After finding that Madame Pomfrey was not there, Kyle immediately analyzed 2 possibilities. Either something happened to the 3 Potters, and Madame Pomfrey was treating them. Or something happened to other little wizards, and Madame Pomfrey was treating them. Either way, it was not good news. In addition, Dumbledore was no longer on the scene. At such an important time, where would he go if he, as the pillar of Hogwarts, did not come out to appease people? Communicate with the Ministry of Magic about Voldemort's resurrection? It shouldn't be. The officials of the Ministry of Magic are not so efficient. Before Kyle could figure it out, the dusty Dumbledore had returned to the hall and stood on the high platform where the teacher's table was originally placed. Hermione Granger, who followed behind him, returned directly to the Gryffindor team, ignored the suspicious eyes around him, and stared at Dumbledore closely, but his eyes were empty and his expression was blank. The discussion in the hall stopped abruptly, and it was unusually quiet. Dumbledore looked around and said, "A terrible attack." He paused, his eyes fell on Hermione's face, and then slowly swept over the students of the 4 colleges. Hermione looked sad and helpless at this time, as if her faith was shattered. "I have a lot to say to you tonight," Dumbledore said, "but first I have to admit that we have lost some good people. They should be standing here." He paused and said, "I hope everyone will observe a moment of silence for those companions who have passed away." Everyone did so. Everyone in the hall stood solemnly, bowed their heads in silence, and looked sad. Kyle glanced at Hermione through the crowd. Tears were quietly sliding down her face. When the moment of silence stopped, everyone looked at Dumbledore, but the little witch still bowed her head and stared at the ground, tears streaming down her face. Dumbledore looked very sad at this time. His lips trembled, and he opened his mouth several times, but could not make any sound. Professor McGonagall also had tears in her eyes, but her expression was very stubborn, and she turned her face to the side, not wanting to let people see her weakness. In the end, Dumbledore still closed his eyes and told the cruel truth. Oliver Wood, the brave captain of Gryffindor Quidditch, bravely stood in front of his classmates when facing the most evil dark wizard in history, and never retreated a step until his death. Roger Davis, the heroic Ravenclaw, protected 2 first-year students under him when the wall collapsed. And Ernie Macmillan, Terry Boot, Katie Bell and Rich Gudd, they all died in this dark wizard invasion. I'm sorry, classmates. Because of my decision, the biggest tragedy in the history of Hogwarts has occurred, and the biggest dereliction of duty of all Hogwarts headmasters. There is no doubt that I killed them. For this, I will regret it for the rest of my life, and I will take all the responsibility, because I did not fulfill my most important responsibility, protecting you. Dumbledore's words have not yet been finished, and the hall has become a mess, and emotional people have even covered their mouths and cried. Everyone looked at Dumbledore in disbelief. How could such a thing happen in Hogwarts, which is known as the safest place? Even Slytherin, who was not affected, was no longer calm. Even if everyone usually belittled Dumbledore, saying that he was a crazy old man and confused, everyone knew in their hearts that he was the greatest white wizard of this century, and no matter how the little snakes slandered him, it was useless. Ignoring the noise in the hall and the students' doubts, Dumbledore stretched out his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. Then he said something that shocked the whole hall and even the whole magic world. Thanks to Wei King, Hun Zhi Shian Iron, a passerby who used Zhao Yi to cultivate immortals, Yi Shen Leng Yuan, Jiang Ying and Zhao Mao, Jinyan Bu Yu 1992, and book friend 2020314121150177 for their recommendation. Votes, and thanks to book friend 201804281907537332 for their monthly votes. Chapter 56 Dumbledore's Speech. These students are examples of the excellent traditions of Hogwarts. Dumbledore continued, they are loyal friends and your enthusiastic playmates. Whether you know them or not, their deaths have an impact on you. Therefore, I think you all have the right to know the truth of the matter. Kyle raised his head and stared at Dumbledore. They, Wood, Davis, Jack Millen and others, were all killed by Voldemort. A burst of terrified whispers swept through the entire hall, and many people even shuddered at the name of Voldemort. The students looked at Dumbledore in suspicion and horror. Dumbledore watched the students go from buzzing to silence, and his face remained calm. The Ministry doesn't want me to tell you, Dumbledore continued. If I did, some parents would probably be horrified. They would either not believe that Voldemort has returned, or think that I shouldn't tell you, because you are still young. But I believe that the truth is better than a lie. It would be a blasphemy to pretend that the deaths of those students were caused by accidents, their own fault, or an ordinary dark wizard. Every face in the hall looked at Dumbledore in horror, and then looked at each other. In the Slytherin team, Kyle saw Malfoy muttering something to his two little followers. There are a few more people who need to be mentioned. Dumbledore continued, of course, I'm talking about Harry Potter, Hermione Granger and Ron Weasley. A ripple swept across the hall. Everyone looked at Hermione, and then turned to face Dumbledore. They were the first to discover Voldemort's conspiracy, Dumbledore said, and tried to stop him at all costs. In every aspect, they showed rare courage among wizards in the face of evil. For this, I commend them. Dumbledore's words caused chaos in the hall again. The students looked at Hermione again, and even some Slytherin students stretched their necks to see the little witch, completely losing their contempt for Hermione, the know-it-all lady. But more Slytherins, such as Malfoy, Crabbe, Goyle, and many other Slytherins stood there disdainfully, without any change in their expressions. When everyone regained their composure, Dumbledore continued, the purpose of Hogwarts is to teach you magic, to teach you loyalty, courage, shrewdness, ambition and the calm use of wisdom. In view of what has just happened, Voldemort has reappeared in the wizarding world. Such a purpose is more important than ever. Everyone in this hall, Dumbledore said, his eyes lingering on every student in the hall. I say again, Voldemort has reappeared in the wizarding world, which makes us more united. We are strong when we are united, and weak when we are divided. Voldemort is a master at spreading hatred and discord. We can only fight it through the strong bonds of friendship and trust. As long as our goals are common and our minds are open, differences in habits and backgrounds are of no concern. I believe, and of course I strongly hope, that I'm wrong, that darkness and difficulties seem to be coming to us. Some of the people in this hall have suffered at the hands of Voldemort. Many families have been torn apart by him. Just now, many students among us have lost their lives. Remember them. Remember, if one day you have to judge right and wrong, easy and difficult, please recall what happened to these upright, kind and brave classmates. Please remember them. After Dumbledore finished his speech, he walked out of the auditorium directly. The reaction of the students in the audience was not the cheering and excitement of the crowd during Martin Luther King's speech, nor was it the enthusiasm and excitement of the crowd during Mr. Wenyado's speech. There was only silence and confusion. The era of Voldemort was not far away from these students. The youngest students were born in the year when Voldemort disappeared, and the oldest students even spent their childhood under Voldemort's rule. They were at an age when they should be innocent and playful, but suddenly they were told that the former Dark Lord had returned, accompanied by an attack and massacre. The speech ended in a dead silence. All the students were gathered in the auditorium to rest that day. The professors hastily repaired the auditorium, conjured up many sleeping bags, and then took turns patrolling around the auditorium. The panicked little animals talked in a low voice, and even because of the indifference of Slytherin, a small conflict broke out. Kyle remembered that the boy seemed to be called Lee Jordan, and he was the commentator of the Quidditch game. "You evil Slytherins are so proud now, aren't you? Your master is back. Are you dancing with joy? Are you eager to go back and pledge your loyalty to him?" Lee Jordan gnashed his teeth and was extremely angry when he spoke, obviously attributing the death of his friend to the Slytherins. However, this small conflict was quickly settled by the professors, and time passed slowly in this sadness and depression. Contrary to Kyle's expectations, the Daily Prophet did not report anything related to the attack the next day, and the entire magic world seemed unusually calm. But watching the little wizards constantly mailing letters to the outside world, and the owls falling one by one, and then flying out of the school, Kyle knew that this calm would not last long. Since yesterday's speech, Dumbledore has never appeared again, leaving only a group of professors in the auditorium to respond to sudden dangers at any time. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, several officials from the Ministry of Magic appeared in the auditorium, also standing on the high platform where Dumbledore stood yesterday, and gave another speech. But the content of the speech was not quite the same as what Dumbledore said. He just repeatedly comforted the students, and emphasized that the Ministry of Magic was investigating the truth of the attack. There was no mention of Voldemort's appearance in his words. This made Kyle taste a different taste. Soon, the third day arrived. At breakfast time, the surging owls almost covered the entire ceiling. Every student received a letter, and the professors received even more. The noisy owls and flying letters almost buried the teacher's seat. Kyle opened today's Daily Prophet. In the center of the first page was a photo of the auditorium after the attack on Hogwarts. Below was a photo of Potter, Granger, and Weasley. I don't know where the reporter of the Daily News got it from. The three people in the photo were chatting in the lounge, and a mouse was lying on Weasley's legs. The title clearly expressed the attitude of the Ministry of Magic. The Dark Lord attacks Hogwarts, and the Savior turns the tide again. Thanks to Weeking and Sora for their recommendation votes. Chapter 57, Absurd Human Comedy. Although the attack had passed, the atmosphere of the whole school was still immersed in sadness and panic. The little animals were either confused about the future, anxious and without a backbone, or crazy to find trouble with Slytherin. The latter was mainly Gryffindor. Insults, provocations, pushing and even fighting. The antagonism between the colleges suddenly increased, and the old teachers seemed to have returned to the school during the war. The whole Hogwarts was like a huge gunpowder barrel, which would be completely detonated with just a fuse. This mood lasted until the morning of the third day after the attack. Potter is back. Everyone knows that Potter led his companions to stop the Dark Lord and disintegrate the Dark Lord's conspiracy, but Dumbledore kept silent about what happened. Granger, who returned to the college normally without injury, also kept silent about it. No matter how the classmates asked her, she did not reveal a word. The classmates saw that Granger's expression was always depressed and sad, immersed in sadness and unable to extricate herself, and they did not have the heart to ask her about it. Although he was extremely curious, like a kitten scratching its itch in its heart, he had to endure it, and could not get any answers. Finally, the other protagonist of the incident, the Savior Potter, came back. Except for Slytherin, the other small animals surrounded him like sharks smelling blood, and threw questions to Potter. Harry, what conspiracy of the Dark Lord did you crack? Harry, did Dumbledore teach you powerful magic, and then you defeated the Dark Lord? Harry, tell me what happened. Harry. The children surrounded Potter, and Potter, who had just been discharged from the hospital, had no idea what was going on. He stood there in a daze, not knowing whose question to answer. It was the appearance of the Weasley twins from Gryffindor that saved Potter. The two squeezed into the crowd, escorted Potter to the dining table, and then asked Potter eagerly. Fortunately, the owls formed a circle for Potter. A large number of owls flew into the hall, and letters and packages fell on the dining seats like rain, which diverted the attention of the small animals. There are many little wizards who subscribe to the Prophet in Hogwarts. Soon, the headline of the newspaper spread throughout Hogwarts. Recently, a rumor that Hogwarts was attacked by unknown persons began to circulate in the wizarding world. In order to report the truth of the facts completely, our reporter worked hard for 2 days and nights and finally restored the complete course of events. For this purpose, our reporter interviewed Professor Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts, Mr. Fudge, the Minister of Magic, Ms. Dolores Umbridge, the Senior Deputy Minister of Magic, and Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart, the famous adventurer. According to people familiar with the matter, in fact, as early as last year, the conspiracy had already begun to take shape. Mr. Nickleam's residence was attacked several times by unknown dark wizards, and the target of the dark wizards was the target of this attack, the Philosopher's Stone. In order to protect the Philosopher's Stone from being snatched by dark wizards, Mr. Nick Flamel gave it to his best friend, Professor Dumbledore. The professor hid the Philosopher's Stone in Hogwarts, and laid out many protective measures. It is reported that the professors involved in the arrangement of protective measures included not only Dumbledore himself, but also the deans of the 4 colleges of Hogwarts and many professors. However, Professor Dumbledore obviously did not consider the safety of many students in Hogwarts when fulfilling the entrustment of his old friend, which also laid the groundwork for the tragedy that happened later. During the year that the Philosopher's Stone was kept in Hogwarts, Dumbledore had left school for a long time many times to handle personal affairs. During this period, he neither fulfilled his obligations as the principal, nor took his old friend's entrustment to protect the Philosopher's Stone to heart. Obviously he was very confident in the many guards he had set up. It was this negligence that gave the dark wizards who attacked Hogwarts the opportunity to take action. According to the news obtained by this newspaper, the dark wizard swaggered into the protection carefully prepared by Dumbledore, and walked to the Philosopher's Stone without any obstacles, because this dark wizard had been lurking in Hogwarts for a year, and had completely figured out how to deal with Dumbledore's protection. Fortunately, not everyone in Hogwarts was as careless as Professor Dumbledore. The great savior discovered the loopholes in Dumbledore's protection, and warned the professors in school in time, and finally arrived at the scene before the dark wizard got the Philosopher's Stone. Unfortunately, the savior's warning did not bring a happy ending, but the beginning of a disaster. Seeing that the situation was not good, the powerful attacker immediately fought with the professors while running away. Ernie Macmillan and Terry Boot were affected by this battle, and died tragically on the spot. But even after paying such a heavy price, the professor still did not bring the attacker to justice. With no way to escape, the attacker used a spell to blow through the corridor between Hogwarts and the Great Hall. Rich Gut died from this spell, and Roger Davis behind the wall was crushed to death by the collapsed wall. Witnesses said that the attacker laughed and walked into the Great Hall after blowing up the wall, and at the same time, looked at the professors of Hogwarts with disdain, and then fled away in a puff of black smoke. According to Senior Deputy Minister Dolores Umbridge, this was obviously a variant of the flying spell, which allowed the attacker to quickly get rid of the pursuit of the professors. The arrogant attacker also released a killing curse on an ignorant little wizard while escaping, causing Oliver Wood to die on the spot. The above is the process of the Hogwarts attack restored by our reporter after unremitting efforts. Given the power of the spell used by the attacker to blow up the wall, there is reason to believe that this is a Death Eater on the run. Because this spell reminds us of the spell used by Sirius Black, the Dark Lord's #1 Death Eater, to blow up the entire street 11 years ago. Considering that even though Hogwarts was protected by powerful magic, it was still blown through the wall, we have reason to believe that this is the effect of the same spell. As we all know, Sirius Black learned this powerful black magic from the Dark Lord. However, when our reporter interviewed Mr. Arnold Peasgood of the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, he got a different guess. We can't attribute the attack to the Death Eaters so arbitrarily. There are many powerful black magics that can achieve the same effect. We all know that both the Dark Lord and the Death Eaters are accustomed to leaving the dark mark at the crime scene, and we did not see the mark at the scene of this attack. So there is reason to believe that this attack has nothing to do with the Death Eaters or the Dark Lord. Mr. Arnold Peasgood said. In order to get to the bottom of the identity of the attacker, our reporter invited Minister of Magic Mr. Fudge, Senior Under Minister of Magic Ms. Dolores Umbridge and famous adventurer Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart for a joint interview. Chapter 58, Absurd Human Comedy. During the interview, Mr. Fudge emphasized many times, this attack is a blatant provocation to the Ministry of Magic. All personnel in the ministry will do their best to investigate and arrest this attack. The wizarding world has been peaceful for more than 10 years, and the Ministry of Magic will certainly continue to ensure the stable life of the people. We will not allow certain people to use the name of the Dark Lord to spread rumors and disrupt the wizarding world. When asked about Headmaster Dumbledore's claim that the attacker was the Dark Lord himself, Senior Deputy Minister Dolores Umbridge said bluntly, "It is well known that the Dark Lord was defeated by Harry Potter 11 years ago. Now Dumbledore says that the Dark Lord has reappeared in the wizarding world. This is obviously a lie made up by Dumbledore to cover up his own dereliction of duty, intending to use the Dark Lord to divert the public's attention and downplay the impact of this accident. But the Ministry of Magic will not turn a blind eye to this accident, and will definitely investigate it to the end and seek justice for those children who died with their eyes open." Ms. Umbridge was very emotional when she spoke, and it was obvious that she hated Dumbledore's behavior. During the period, she also expressed her views many times. Over the years, some people have said that Dumbledore is an old lunatic and an old fool, but in view of his important contributions to the wizarding world, the Ministry of Magic has always turned a blind eye to some of his practices, and has retained his many positions including the headmaster of Hogwarts. But after this incident, we can see that he is no longer the great white wizard leader who defeated Gellert Grindelwald. Now he is just a crazy and arrogant villain. Ms. Umbridge was too emotional and had to stop speaking. Although Mr. Fudge beside her did not express his approval, his expression clearly agreed with Ms. Umbridge's words. Mr. Gilderoy Lockhart also had a lot of say in this attack. As we all know, in Mr. Lockhart's adventure, he not only had to deal with evil creatures such as vampires and werewolves, but also had to be on guard against possible dark wizards. The Dark Wizard in this attack is obviously very powerful, but there is no doubt that he is not as powerful as me, because I can think of several magics that achieve similar effects at the same time, and the attacker can only escape after casting the spell, which also indirectly proves that the attacker is not the Dark Lord himself. After all, the Dark Lord's power is well known. It's a pity that I was not there at the time. I believe that, if I were there, perhaps such a tragedy would not have happened. But it doesn't matter. As an outstanding graduate of Hogwarts, I'm willing to provide sufficient help to Hogwarts. If possible, I even hope to teach at Hogwarts next semester to help Hogwarts overcome difficulties and resist dark wizards. Mr. Lockhart is indeed a powerful adventurer. I believe that, if Dumbledore had hired Mr. Lockhart to Hogwarts this year, he would not have let the attacker hurt so many young wizards. No, this assumption is not true, because if Mr. Lockhart was at Hogwarts this year, I think he would definitely remind Dumbledore of the loopholes in his protection, and at the same time, discover the dark wizards in advance and eliminate the danger in the bud. After reading the full text, Kyle clearly felt Dumbledore's dilemma. It seems that the authorities are unwilling to believe his words, and because of this huge dereliction of duty, he has become surrounded by enemies. How dare that old madman Dumbledore put such a dangerous item on campus? Romilda Vane. Don't tell me any weird things about the Dark Lord. You have been brainwashed by that old madman Dumbledore. Now, pack your luggage immediately. I will take you home immediately. The loud noise interrupted Kyle's thoughts. It was a howler letter. Obviously, the anxious parents no longer trust Dumbledore and the school, and decided to take the students home immediately. And such remarks are not unique. Although it is not extreme to send a howler letter, it is not difficult to hear from the whispers of the little animals that there are many parents who have decided to take their children home. At this time, the atmosphere in the auditorium is no longer sad and solemn before breakfast. The little wizards cast doubtful eyes on the teacher's seat and Harry Potter. The anxious Potter is loudly explaining what happened to his classmates. But the little wizards were not completely convinced. Only a few little wizards still firmly supported Potter and Dumbledore. From their conversation, it is not difficult to see that the opinions of parents are divided into three types. One side firmly supports Dumbledore, the other side believes the information announced by the Ministry of Magic, and no longer trusts Dumbledore, and the neutrals who waver. This is obviously the mainstream view in the current magic world. As the days passed, many students were picked up in advance, and only a few students remained in the school. The neutrals took the students away with the idea of staying away from danger. The opponents also took the students away, because they no longer trusted the school. Only Dumbledore's staunch supporters remained in the school, but the number was getting smaller and smaller. The news in the Daily Prophet was also boiling, and celebrities from all walks of life jumped out to express their opinions. But Dumbledore had already collapsed in public opinion, and only a few people were still speaking for him. The same discussion also took place in the principal's office of Hogwarts. Professor Dumbledore, who had not appeared for many days, and the two deans McGonagall and Snape were among them. "Albus, have you really made up your mind? This is not fair to you, nor is it fair to Hogwarts, and to those who still trust you." Professor McGonagall was extremely emotional and strongly opposed Dumbledore's idea. But Dumbledore looked calm, without a trace of panic. "Minerva, don't persuade me. I have decided to resign as headmaster. I'm not forced by the Ministry of Magic and the Board of Directors, but I need more time to discover some truths." Dumbledore's words made McGonagall look extremely unwilling. "Are you just going to let the Ministry of Magic and the Daily Prophet slander you? There are fewer and fewer people who still support you. Calm down, Minerva. We all saw that Voldemort has not fully returned. At that time, he could only possess Quirrell to barely maintain. In order to exert greater strength, he even forcibly burned Quirrell's life. This is why Quirrell was reduced to ashes after the wall was blown up. This means that we still have time to make some arrangements before he comes back, and this is why I have to resign as headmaster." Professor Snape did not speak during the conversation between Dumbledore and McGonagall. He just listened to their debate with a stiff face, and occasionally brushed his left arm. At this time, Dumbledore also turned the topic to Snape. "Severus, are you okay? Does it have any reaction?" "Of course I'm fine, Dumbledore, but you really need to speed up the process. I told you a long time ago that it's becoming more and more obvious." Snape's words left McGonagall speechless, and she could only vent angrily. "Those incompetent guys can only point fingers in the Daily Prophet to increase their own reputation. They completely ignore the truth of the facts. Those guys who have gained countless benefits by supporting you are also a bunch of fence sitters. They just abandoned you when they saw that the wind was not right. And that Lockhart, such a powerful adventurer, how could he be deceived by the Ministry of Magic? He is not deceived. You see, he didn't forget to promote his book when he was interviewed. The sales of the Daily Prophet are not as high as those of his new book. How could such a smart person be deceived by the Ministry of Magic? He hopes that the matter will become bigger and even live in the Daily Prophet." Snape sneered at Lockhart with a cold face. "But I have to say that Mr. Lockhart is a good man. He submitted an application for the position of defense against the dark arts professor to the school, even though he knew Hogwarts was in danger. He also expressed his hope to do his part to protect Hogwarts. Although he is a bit mercenary, he is a good man." "Albus, are you going to interview Lockhart in person?" McGonagall asked Dumbledore. "You decide for yourself. You will be the headmaster in the future, Minerva." The conversation in the headmaster's office ended hastily. McGonagall began to prepare to take over the position of headmaster, and Dumbledore left the school again. The personnel changes in the school had nothing to do with Kyle, but the farce of the past few days made Kyle very speechless. If we put aside the danger of Voldemort's resurrection, the farce in front of us is no different from the various big melons in the entertainment industry in the previous life. As long as there is a big melon about a star, the development of the situation is no longer controlled by the star himself. First, various self-media took advantage of the traffic and jumped out to express a specious opinion. Then paparazzi from all walks of life jumped out and rushed to publish all kinds of evidence they had secretly photographed. No matter what they took, they dared to publish it after a little editing. Then they added a paragraph and a picture, and the content was all made up. Even if they couldn't extort money from the stars, they could still successfully get a wave of attention and increase traffic. Then people from all walks of life spoke enthusiastically, and all kinds of big V's, commentators, and people and dogs came to show off. Anyway, no matter what the truth of the matter is, or what the outcome is, these people will make a lot of money. And this is only the front stage. The capital game behind the scenes is exciting. Some people are protected by capital, some are abandoned, and the hostile capital is kicking the well. The confrontation between the whitewashing water army and the smearing water army will make a mess. No matter what the final result is, the melon-eating crowd is very happy. The fans of all walks of life have increased greatly. Those who broadcast live. Those who sell goods, and those who accept advertisements and publish soft articles. Regardless of whether the stars who expose the melons lose or make money, these passers-by will definitely make a lot of money. What goes around, comes around. Kyle thought that he had successfully avoided all the gossips in the entertainment industry in his previous life, after traveling through time, and his ears could be at peace. Unexpectedly, he was still fed with gossips from the wizarding world. He escaped the first day, but he couldn't escape the 15th. He was still too naive. Chapter 59 Dumbledore and Fudge's building collapses. In the end, less than 1/3 of the students stayed in school to attend the end of year banquet. This was the result of many fearless Slytherins staying in Hogwarts to watch the fun. The hall was decorated with green and silver, representing Slytherin, to celebrate their winning of the House Cup for 7 consecutive years. On the wall behind the guest of honor, there was a huge banner with a Slytherin snake painted on it. Snape's face was extremely proud. This was one of the few times that Kyle remembered the headmaster's expression being so exposed. When Potter walked into the hall suddenly became silent, and then suddenly everyone started talking loudly again. This has become a regular program in the past few days. Whenever Potter walked in during dinner, he would always get a lot of attention. He walked to the Gryffindor table and sat between Ron and Hermione, pretending not to notice that people stood up and stared at him. Little Red Hair was also discharged from the hospital 2 days ago. It was said that he suffered a heavy blow in the attack. Thanks to Little Red Hair's big mouth, Kyle had already understood their obstruction. A moment later, Dumbledore also arrived, and the noise in the hall gradually subsided. Another year has passed. Dumbledore said, "Before you enjoy these delicious dishes, I must trouble you to listen to the cliches of an old man. This is a different year. We have experienced disasters, and heroes have emerged among you." While speaking, Dumbledore also looked at Potter and nodded slightly. "You must have more knowledge in your heads than in the past. You have a whole summer vacation waiting for you. You can digest those things before the next semester begins, so that your brains can be freed up now. Before the dinner begins, we must first hold the award ceremony for the House Cup. The specific scores of each house are as follows. 4th place, Gryffindor, 312 points. 3rd place, Hufflepuff, 352 points. 2nd place, Ravenclaw, 426 points. And 1st place, Slytherin, 472 points. A thunderous cheer and stomping of feet broke out at the Slytherin table. Kyle saw Draco Malfoy hitting the table hard with his wine glass. But the pride and cheers of Slytherin did not last long. Yes, it was a good performance. Dumbledore said. However, several recent events must also be taken into account. The hall became very quiet, and the Slytherin smiles also restrained a little, and their faces became not so good. Dumbledore cleared his throat. "I still have the last few points to distribute. Let me see. By the way, the first item is Mr. on Weasley." Weasley's face flushed red all of a sudden, and he looked like a carrot tanned by the sun. He won the most exciting game of chess in Hogwarts in many years, and I reward Gryffindor House with 50 points for this. The Gryffindors cheered loudly. The stars above their heads seemed to be shaken slightly. Kyle even heard Percy Weasley loudly telling other prefects, "That's my brother." The heartless Gryffindors were just cheering for Weasley's extra points, and some of them realized that Potter and Granger would also get extra points. Although it seemed that Gryffindor's score would not be able to surpass Slytherin's to get the House Cup in the end, at least it was not the last one. But the Slytherins all had gloomy faces, and the suspicious little snakes had obviously realized that the situation was not good. Listen to the reason for the extra points. He won the most exciting game of chess in Hogwarts in many years. Most of the little snakes suddenly realized a problem at this time. The measure to protect the Philosopher's Stone was to pass it by placing a winning flag. Thinking about the other protective measures that came out of Ron's mouth, the Slytherins finally realized that this so-called blocking of dark wizards, the so-called protecting the Philosopher's Stone, and the so-called restricted area on the 3rd floor seemed to be full of Dumbledore's calculations from the beginning. Now, Dumbledore is finally going to show his true colors. Unfortunately, the plan to protect the Philosopher's Stone did not develop according to Dumbledore's idea, and even major flaws occurred. Disdainful sneers appeared on the mouths of the little snakes. The ancestral look of Slytherin was picked up by the little snakes. Regardless of size, they all sat upright on the chairs, with elegant and well-educated demeanor. The expressions on their faces revealed strong self-confidence in their arrogance, and they all looked at Dumbledore with sarcastic eyes. The changes in Slytherin were immediately noticed by the keen little wizards. Although there were not many people in the auditorium, there were still whispers. Of course, all this could not escape the eyes of the rostrum. Dumbledore even paused and then glanced at Snape. The head of Slytherin looked indifferent, sitting on the chair with his arms folded, without saying a word. Although Dumbledore did not stop his speech, and even his expression did not change at all, Kyle seemed to see that Dumbledore's eyes had darkened a lot. The second item is Miss Hermione Granger. She faced the raging fire and performed logical reasoning calmly. I will award Gryffindor House 50 points. The third item is Harry Potter, Dumbledore said, speeding up the process intentionally. The hall became extremely quiet at this time, and the Gryffindors didn't even have time to cheer for the little witch. He showed fearless courage and extraordinary courage. For this, I will award Gryffindor House 60 points. Everyone felt something strange. Slytherin, who was tied, said nothing, and the little animals left in Hufflepuff were a little uneasy. The clever little eagles also guessed something from Slytherin's reaction, but the little eagles who had nothing to do with it of course would not make any moves. They just watched the development of the situation excitedly, and secretly exchanged glances from time to time. After confirming the look in their eyes, they were also people who loved to watch the show. Huge cheers broke out at the Gryffindor table, and the noise was deafening. Those little lions who could still calculate the scores in their minds while shouting their voices hoarse knew that Gryffindor now had 472 points, exactly the same as Slytherin, and they were already close to the House Cup champion. If Headmaster Dumbledore had given Harry one more point, it would be great. Now we can only share the House Cup with Slytherin. Many little lions were thinking in their hearts that they were getting more and more greedy. Dumbledore paused for a while. All the little wizards stared at Dumbledore, but the meanings in their eyes were completely different. Kyle could see that Dumbledore was hesitating at this time, and some sharp little wizards also saw it. Only the silly little badger and the little lions had no idea what was going on. They thought that Dumbledore had deliberately given Gryffindor some time to cheer, which made the little lions cheer more unscrupulously. Finally, he raised one hand, and the hall gradually became quiet again. He said with a forced smile, "It seems that we need to make some small changes to the decoration here." He clapped his hands, and immediately, the green draped ribbons near the Gryffindor dining table turned bright red, and the silver turned gold. The huge Slytherin snake behind the rostrum shrank by half, and a majestic Gryffindor lion appeared next to it. As you can see, this year's College Cup was won by Gryffindor and Slytherin together. The Gryffindor table was boiling with excitement again. Potter and Weasley were even lifted up by their classmates and thrown into the air over and over again. Every time they were thrown up, they would shout, "We got the House Cup." Unlike the joy of the other little lions, Kyle noticed that Hermione was just forcing a smile on her face. Professor Snape stood up on the podium and shook hands with Professor McGonagall, forcing an awkward smile on his face. Dumbledore's plan was undoubtedly good, paving the way for Potter and accumulating reputation for him in Gryffindor. Coming here every year in the future, coupled with the future battle with the Dark Lord, this will destine Potter to have a huge reputation in the entire wizarding world. Is Dumbledore training a successor for the White Wizard leader? Unfortunately, times have changed, my lord. It's okay for Gryffindor to entertain itself internally, but Dumbledore shouldn't use a trophy that belongs exclusively to Slytherin as a qualification for Potter's promotion. Dumbledore is no longer the world-famous White Wizard leader with impeccable morals. Ignoring Gryffinder's cheers, the little snakes looked at each other. There were several people at the scene who were qualified to stand up and speak for Slytherin. The prefect, the heir of the leading family of the wizarding world's nobles, and Kyle, the uncrowned king. The little snakes were fighting silently at this time. Those who stood up would gain great prestige in Slytherin, and such a direct confrontation with Dumbledore would also spread their reputation to the wizarding world. As for the pressure that the speaker and the family behind him might encounter from Dumbledore and Gryffindor later, what a joke. If they don't stand up, they won't be hostile to Dumbledore and Gryffindor. The British nobles will not blindly follow others just because of the reputation of their family. Which of the leaders of the nobles in the past did not subdue the Slytherins of the same period during their school years and use them as the team and eventually become the Spokesperson of the nobles? Draco of the Malfoy family was the first to withdraw from the competition. Although Malfoy's reputation added a lot of points to him, and his own strength was not bad among the same grade, he was still too immature now. Prefect Parker also withdrew from the competition. Parker's strength and skills were not bad, but just good. In terms of strength, he is not as good as Kyle, who can convince people with reason. In terms of tactics, he is not as good as Cole, the 5th year prefect. His family power is only average. He can become a prefect only because the prefects selected by the school must be 7th year students. In the end, Kyle stood up. It is not that his classmates are afraid of Kyle's strength, but they really admire his character and cherish their friendship with him. The Slytherin team is equally important to Kyle. If he wants to realize his dream of a floating city, the support of these nobles is indispensable. I think Voldemort relied on the classmates he conquered during his school years as a team to finally create the Death Eaters that terrorize the wizarding world. It is foreseeable that with the return of Voldemort, the Slytherins will be ruled by him again. This is something Kyle does not allow. For his dream of a floating city, Kyle is not afraid, even if he has to snatch food from the tiger's mouth of Voldemort. What's more, what is there for Kyle to fear about an old crayon that is beaten to death once a year? Not only to Dumbledore, Kyle also wants to say to Voldemort, "Sir, times have changed." He knocked on the cup slowly. The sound was not loud, but it was clearly heard by everyone under the spread of magic. "Professor Dumbledore, can you allow me to say a few words?" Dumbledore's expression did not change. He was still smiling, but his eyes were no longer as peaceful as before. I don't know if it was Kyle's illusion. After Dumbledore's glasses flashed, he could not see Dumbledore's eyes clearly. "Of course, Kyle, I'm looking forward to your speech. Let's talk about the reward first. Professor, you seem to have forgotten Mr. Neville Longbottom. As far as I know, in order to stop the 3 Potters from violating school rules, the timid Mr. Longbottom did not hesitate to confront the 3 Potters. Although he was eventually turned into a stone statue and stood at the door of the lounge for a night, he was worthy of Gryffindor's bravery." Kyle smiled and said, and signaled to the surprised Longbottom with his eyes. Longbottom opened his mouth in surprise at this time and looked at Kyle blankly. The classmates around him asked him, "Do you know that Slytherin? Neville, you are great too." At the same time, the Gryffindors looked at Dumbledore. The eager eyes made Dumbledore unable to avoid them, and at the same time, he was full of bitterness. Kyle was roasting him on the fire. Even if he was reluctant, Dumbledore still had to speak. "You are right, Kyle. There are many kinds of courage. We need superhuman courage to deal with enemies, and it also takes great courage to stick to our position in front of friends. Therefore, I will reward Mr. Neville Longbottom with 10 points. Adding points to Gryffindor did not make Dumbledore happy, because he had guessed what Kyle was going to say next. Even the reckless Gryffindor did not cheer, because the score exceeded Slytherin, and they were all waiting for Kyle's next words. After talking about Mr. Longbottom, it's time to talk about the extra points that Potter and his friends just gave. I'm not questioning you, but after all, the course of events has never been officially confirmed. What Potter and his friends did was just a rumor that circulated in the academy, which is unfair to Potter and his friends. In order to prevent unnecessary suspicion, why don't you let Potter and Mr. Weasley tell the whole story? Potter and Weasley's faces turned red, and they were a little overwhelmed. Especially Weasley. His face was particularly strange, with both anger at Kyle's questioning and the expectation of being able to tell his glorious deeds in front of all the teachers and students in the school. But Dumbledore obviously didn't want them to speak and said directly, "In that case, Kyle, then I will tell you about the behavior of Potter and his friends. Why don't you let Potter and his friends speak for themselves?" "Let me speak." Two voices interrupted Dumbledore at the same time. One was Kyle. The other was Hermione Granger. "Thanks to KU I do for the reward. Thanks to KU I do, Weaking, Soul of the Clouds, You of the Sky, Yeju Tenglong, The Emperor's Late Years Are Unknown, Manjusaka, and many book friends who have not given nicknames for their recommendation votes. Thanks to Ranby for the monthly ticket." Chapter 60 Dumbledore and Fudge's building collapses. Hermione? Potter and Weasley looked at her in confusion at the same time. They had noticed the strange behavior of the little witch in the past few days, but the two slow-witted little boys just thought that their friend was grieving for the classmates who died in the attack. But Hermione's face at this time told them that things were not that simple. The little witch's face was full of pain, self-blame, loss, and relief. "Hermione, there is no need to force yourself. You didn't do anything wrong, and you don't need to take any responsibility for the attack." Kyle also noticed the abnormality of the little witch, and even saw Hermione's decision at this time. In return for Mr. Granger's kindness, Kyle had to take care of the little witch, so he persuaded her. Hermione looked at Kyle gratefully, but did not give up her idea. After pursing her lips, she finally said, "The story starts from when Hagrid took Harry to Gringotts before school started. The little witch's expression was always complicated, and the classmates also learned about Potter's adventurous first year as he narrated. Finally I stayed in front of the flame, and Harry walked into the last room and faced the Dark Lord alone." Hermione's words made the little wizards exclaim in a burst of surprise. Obviously, the exciting adventure made them unable to stop, especially since this adventure happened next to them. Many little wizards wanted to replace Weasley and become a member of the adventure group. After all, Hermione provided intellectual support several times throughout the process. Not everyone has the courage to face the dark wizards by themselves. So it seems that only Weasley is dispensable and can be replaced. After all, who can't play wizard chess? However, before the little witch finished speaking, Hermione looked at Snape awkwardly and continued, "I want to apologize to Professor Snape. I'm sorry that we always thought you were the dark wizard who wanted to steal the Philosopher's Stone, and therefore did something that offended you." Hermione's words did not have any effect on Snape. Think about it, it's right. With Kyle's understanding of the professor, this kind of thing will not make any waves in his heart. After all, there are many people who hate the professor, so who can Hermione be? Not embarrassed by Snape's disregard, Hermione continued, "As I just said, during the whole adventure, Ron, Harry and I went out at night many times, and entered the restricted area on the 3rd floor twice. Even if our purpose is just, the violations in the process cannot be ignored. I'm sorry, Headmaster Dumbledore." After saying that, the little witch closed her eyes, stopped talking, and did not sit down. The hall was silent at this time. Potter and Weasley looked at Hermione in astonishment. "Hermione, are you crazy? What are you talking about? Tell Headmaster Dumbledore that you are talking nonsense. What are you doing? We have finally reached the House Cup." Hermione's words made Gryffindor in chaos, and even Weasley thought of Hermione and roared loudly. Unexpectedly, before Kyle could open fire, Gryffindor itself became chaotic. Helpless Dumbledore stood up and stretched out his hand to calm the commotion in the audience. Hermione's words did not change his expression. He said calmly, "You are an honest girl, Hermione. As you said, righteous behavior should be rewarded, but violations should not be ignored. Because of your night wandering and trespassing into the restricted area, 25 points will be deducted for each of you. Do you agree with this result?" Hermione was silent for a long time, then said, "Of course, Professor. Anything else?" The stubborn little girl did not speak or sit down. It was obvious that she was still struggling in her heart. In the end, she seemed to have made up her mind. She suddenly raised her head and looked directly at Dumbledore bravely. "Professor, there are some things that seem to have never been explained. The little witch pursed her lips and continued. Why did you agree to store the Philosopher's Stone in Hogwarts? Why didn't you carry it with you? Why? The next words made Hermione feel extremely embarrassed, but she still insisted. Why are the protective measures so poor that even a few of us first year freshmen can pass it easily? Shut up. Hermione, are you confused? Hermione's words caused an uproar in the hall. Professor McGonagall stood up and scolded Hermione loudly. But the little witch looked resolute at this time. No matter the curses from other Gryffindor students or the scolding from Professor McGonagall, she did not waver at all. Sure enough, Kyle sighed inwardly. Granger has always been a smart girl, but Dumbledore's identity as the leader of the White Wizards blinded her eyes. But the death of her classmates hit her hard, but it also tore apart the influence of Dumbledore's majestic figure on her. As a little witch who has studied in elementary school for 6 years in the Muggle world, she clearly knows what a school should be like. No matter how magical a magic school is, it should not become a safe room, a battlefield, or a base for some people to train their own men. Voldemort is like this, and so is Dumbledore. Hermione still looked at Dumbledore stubbornly. The Gryffindor table was in a mess, and some little lions were cursing her loudly, trying to stop her. The other little lions, especially those from the Muggle world, gradually quieted down. The badgers were still terrified and didn't know what was going on, but Kyle keenly saw that many of them were laughing. The little eagles also looked indifferent and ate melons happily. At the long table of Slytherin, although they still looked elegant and arrogant on the surface, their gloating eyes betrayed their true thoughts. Finally, Dumbledore slowly stood up and looked at the little witch with a complicated expression. Hermione, you are better than I expected. There are very few young wizards of your age who are so sharp. I have to admit that it was my negligence that caused the tragedy of this attack. I thought it was just an ordinary dark wizard who was spying on the Philosopher's Stone, but I didn't expect that the one who was attracted in the end was Voldemort himself. So, before Dumbledore could finish his words, Hermione almost screamed to interrupt him. Her expression was slightly out of control. You know that is not an ordinary dark wizard. Ordinary dark wizards can't invade Gringotts. You knew that hiding the Philosopher's Stone in Hogwarts was a dangerous practice. You knew that Quirrell was not right. You still put the Philosopher's Stone in school instead of carrying it with you. Hermione gasped, and then said in despair, you even arrived that day, right? You were already in the room when Harry rode his broom to catch the key. After Harry walked into the fire, you followed him in, right? I saw it. You could obviously stop all this from happening. They didn't have to die. When you decided to put the danger in the school, what did you think of these Hogwarts students? While you were watching things unfold, what did you think of these students at Hogwarts? When you set up this child's play level for Harry, what did you think of these students at Hogwarts? The little witch finished speaking and sat down on the chair weakly, covering her face with her hands, and burst into tears. The hall was silent at first, as if the pause button was pressed, and then exclamations, doubts, and the sound of sucking cold noodles came one after another. Potter looked at Dumbledore in shock, and then looked back at the crying Hermione, at a loss. All the students looked at Dumbledore, waiting for his answer. Kyle suddenly thought of a sentence he had read in his previous life. I watched him build a tall building. I watched him entertain guests, and I watched his building collapse. Like reincarnation, such fragments are constantly played out in history, but forgetful humans always find it difficult to remember lessons. Dumbledore tried to use his great prestige to escort Potter and pave the way, but the accident not only disrupted his plan, but also destroyed half of his reputation that he had accumulated over half a century. Now, with the little witch's defection, the remaining reputation also collapsed. Young Kyle had never seen the difficulty of Dumbledore's building a tall building, but he certainly knew that Dumbledore had unlimited prestige in the wizarding world. Unfortunately, he made a wrong move and lost everything. He crossed the line. The moment he took the initiative to put the battlefield in the school, he lost. Not only did he lose his prestige and power, but he also lost his base, Hogwarts. Chapter 61 Dumbledore and Fudge's building collapses. Dumbledore looked at the audience with a tired look, his face full of sadness. He once thought that Gryffindor was completely his backyard. The righteous and brave little lions worshipped him as a god. They agreed with his views, followed his instructions, and regarded him as a guiding light. However, the lion's sense of justice is a double-edged sword. It hurts others as well as themselves. When his behavior and his beliefs deviated from the justice and righteousness that the lions agreed with, Gryffindor was in chaos. It is undeniable that the little lions in the audience still have his firm supporters, but the people's hearts are scattered. Hermione stabbed the first blow of the defection, but it was by no means the last one. Dumbledore could already foresee the split of the Gryffindor camp. "I'm sorry, Hermione." Dumbledore finally stood up, and the hall temporarily quieted down, waiting for Dumbledore's explanation. After hesitating for a long time, Dumbledore continued, "I'm sorry to disappoint you, but you have to believe that I have never betrayed justice from the beginning to the end. All of this is to defeat evil." It seems that he is explaining to the students in the audience, and it seems that he is convincing himself. Looking at the sadness under the white hair of the old man on the stage, the Gryffindors no longer have the heart to continue to blame him. Only then did they realize that, although this old man has always shown strength and wisdom, he is over 100 years old, and can be said to have been fighting against evil all his life. The little wizards in the audience stopped talking, and were also at a loss. They suddenly realized that the leader of Gryffindor was really old, and was about to be forced out of the position of leader by themselves. Where will Gryffindor go in the future? Under the leadership of Dumbledore for nearly half a century, the little lions have become accustomed to obeying Dumbledore's arrangements. All they need to do is charge forward. Now that the myth of Gryffindor has been shattered, where will the future go? Not only are the Gryffindors confused, but Kyle is also confused. Although Dumbledore was pulled down from the altar, the chaos in Gryffindor was only temporary. When people forget the pain of the attack, things will pass, and Dumbledore will still be the natural leader of Gryffindor. At most he will move from the front stage to the backstage. Even Kyle, the puppet in front of the stage, can think of who it is, Minerva McGonagall. But there is no way around it. Dumbledore's leadership of Gryffindor for more than half a century is not so easy to shake. This time it was Dumbledore himself who made a stupid move and crossed the line, and the plan went wrong, which led to this point. All Kyle can do is to take this opportunity to gain greater benefits for himself and pave the way for the future. After a long pause, Dumbledore seemed to have finally convinced himself and continued to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm deeply distressed by my negligence. I have said that I will take full responsibility for this tragedy. Therefore, I have decided that I will resign as the headmaster and will recommend Professor McGonagall to the school directors as the new headmaster." Dumbledore's last words were like a deep sea bomb, blowing up the entire hall. The little wizards were instantly surprised to the extreme. Whether Gryffindor or Slytherin, whether they admired or hated Dumbledore, these little wizards grew up listening to Dumbledore's deeds. And in these stories, Dumbledore and the headmaster of Hogwarts are equal. Dumbledore's explanation was beyond everyone's expectations. This was a sincere answer in the eyes of the little wizards, and even the little witch Hermione raised her head again, and her expression no longer showed dissatisfaction with Dumbledore. What a pity. How could Kyle let Dumbledore get out so easily? What impact would it have on Dumbledore, whether or not he became the headmaster? McGonagall was still obedient to Dumbledore. Amid the incredulous exclamations of the little wizards, Kyle raised his right hand and signaled the little wizards to be quiet. The first to notice him was Slytherin. Then the tables of Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw noticed Slytherin's abnormality and gradually quieted down. The slow-witted little lions finally noticed the silence of the auditorium. After hesitating for 2 minutes, they also quieted down, waiting for Kyle's speech. Professor Snape on the podium started to accuse Dumbledore from Hermione, and his face became very strange. Mixed with memories, resentment, unwillingness, and a sense of revenge, he looked ahead with empty eyes, in a daze. It was not until Kyle jumped out again that the professor came back to his senses and glared at Kyle fiercely. Kyle understood what the professor wanted to say: "Quit while you are ahead." Unfortunately, Kyle wanted more than Snape thought. "Professor Dumbledore, I'm sorry, I'm afraid you can't resign as the headmaster." Kyle's words were beyond everyone's expectations. No one expected that this little snake who stood up to accuse Dumbledore at the beginning would actually speak for the headmaster. Unfortunately, Kyle's next words made Dumbledore and McGonagall feel like their necks were hanging by an ice cave. Because of your dereliction of duty, 5 students died. At the same time, given your indifference to the safety of young wizards throughout the process, I cannot agree with your behavior of escaping punishment by resigning as the headmaster. Almost all the descendants of the 12 directors are sitting in the hall. Potter, Malfoy, Prince, Parkinson, Zabini, Diggory, Longbottom, Greengrass, Flitwick. The heirs of the directors present. You need to fulfill your obligations. I propose to remove Dumbledore from the position of headmaster. After speaking, the hall exploded. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Dumbledore and Fudge's building collapses. If Dumbledore's announcement of his resignation as headmaster was like dropping a bomb in the deep sea, then Kyle's words were like dropping Godzilla on the Japanese island and dropping 2 little boys. Headmaster Dumbledore could no longer maintain his calm face, and Headmaster McGonagall was even more gloomy and terrifying. She gasped for air and stared at Kyle with her eyes, as if she had just met him for the first time. Kyle's words were beyond their expectations. Whether it was the professors on the podium or the students of each college, they all thought that Kyle just wanted to take this opportunity to improve his reputation and discredit Dumbledore. Who knew that Kyle wanted more? Not only did he want to discredit him, but he also wanted to nail Dumbledore to the pillar of shame. In the 1000-year history of Hogwarts, even Phineas Black, who was known as the most unpopular headmaster, also retired smoothly. There has never been a precedent of a headmaster being dismissed. If Kyle's plan succeeds, no matter how high Dumbledore's reputation is, or how great his contribution is, he can't easily turn over. This is different from his voluntary resignation. His voluntary resignation is because of his inner guilt, while his dismissal is the official final conclusion. Mr. Kyle Shafiq, your words. I agree. Draco Malfoy stood up impatiently before Professor McGonagall finished speaking. With an obvious smirk on his face, he had thrown away all his noble demeanor, and the malice in his eyes almost overflowed. Moreover, he not only stood up himself, but also kept signaling his companions to support him. Almost immediately afterwards, Pansy Parkinson also stood up, with the same malice on her face as Malfoy. Then, Blaise Zabini and Daphne Greengrass also stood up. Unlike the obvious gloating of the previous 2, Blaise and Daphne still maintained the etiquette of the nobility, with reserved but proud expressions on their faces. Zabini agrees, Greengrass agrees. The words of several people made McGonagall's face look desperate, because the families represented by these 4 little guys already accounted for 1/3 of the Hogwarts directors. This means that Kyle's proposal must be discussed at the board meeting. And once more than half of the directors agree to this proposal at the board meeting, Dumbledore will be completely disgraced. Because this is not to remove Dumbledore by conspiracy, but to sweep him out when he has clear faults. Unfortunately, the reaction on the scene made Kyle a little disappointed, except for the Slytherins who wanted to drive Dumbledore away from the bottom of their hearts. Both Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw revealed a kind of regret, and Gryffindor. Whether it was those who just defended Dumbledore desperately or reprimanded him, they became united again at this moment and cursed Kyle and Slytherin together. This situation made Kyle faintly frightened. Dumbledore's reputation in the wizarding world is too high. He has led Gryffindor for more than half a century. He has been the leader of the White Wizard camp for more than half a century. This huge influence is far from being crushed by a mistake in front of him. Just like the little lion of Gryffindor. It was just a mess, and fell into the theory of the whole, but as soon as Kyle appeared, these guys immediately turned their guns, and united against the outside world. Obviously, now I can say, that Dumbledore is not good, but others can't, especially Slytherin. Unfortunately, the more this is the case, the more Kyle has to bite the bullet and step on Dumbledore. Because the current Slytherin reminds Kyle of a popular comic in his previous life, Naruto. How similar is Slytherin at this time to the Uchiha clan in the comics? The Uchiha clan is arrogant. Slytherin also has pride written into his bones. The Uchiha clan is suspected by the top because of its strong strength. Slytherin was excluded by Dumbledore because of its huge power. The Uchiha clan went extinct after the Ninetales Rebellion, and Slytherin also went from bad to worse after Voldemort's fall. In the comics, the Uchiha clan was eventually wiped out, leaving only a brainwashed fool who was manipulated all his life. So what will be the ending of Slytherin? Question mark? The tragedy of the Uchiha clan was caused by the high-level people such as the second Hokage, the third Hokage, and the advisor Danzo, and who caused the plight of Slytherin. The atmosphere in the magic world has always been that Slytherin and Gryffindor dislike each other, while Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw stand aside as spectators. Since when did Gryffindor take the lead in the charge, while Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw were looming in the encirclement? It all started when Dumbledore came to power. Before Dumbledore came to power, Gryffindor and Slytherin just had different ideas and couldn't stand each other's way of doing things. But the daughter of the Black family will marry Potter, and the daughter of the Potter family will also marry into the Lestrange family. There are marriages between nobles from time to time. It was after Dumbledore came to power that the two sides became estranged and wished each other dead. Under Dumbledore's constant suppression and the constant erosion of the forces behind him, the nobles were forced to introduce Voldemort as a Spokesperson. At that time, the antagonism between the two sides reached its peak, and war followed. Unfortunately, Dumbledore was one step ahead and took Voldemort away in one wave. For the first time, Slytherin's power was hit hard, and most of the money and power were eroded by the forces represented by Dumbledore. From then on, Hogwarts was no longer Hogwarts. Instead, it was completely divided into Gryffindor, Slytherin, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. And Kyle believed that, if no changes were made, as Dumbledore crushed Voldemort again and again, Slytherin would be completely destroyed in the repeated exploitation. This is exactly why Kyle stood up to Dumbledore. Slytherin cannot decline, which Kyle will never allow. Because Slytherin has been regarded as his base. In order to realize his ideal, Slytherin's strength cannot be weakened too much. This forced Kyle to take advantage of Dumbledore's big mistake. Completely pull him down from the altar and put him behind the scenes to buy time for himself. Not only that, in order to lead Slytherin out of the current predicament, Kyle also needs to work hard to get Slytherin out of Voldemort's influence. As long as Voldemort is not dead, Voldemort is still evil, and Slytherin can't escape the label of evil. But can Voldemort turn back and turn evil? No. Because Dumbledore doesn't allow it. So Dumbledore can't be given the opportunity to use Voldemort to brush his reputation again and again. And Voldemort must die. Only when he dies, Slytherin will no longer be evil. So if Slytherin wants to live, he can only kill Voldemort himself. If it doesn't work once, then twice, and if it doesn't work twice, then 3 times. As for the danger, the first siege of Voldemort was destined to be full of danger. But judging from Voldemort's intelligence, as long as he was figured out the first time, the second and third times would only become easier and easier. There is no other reason, only practice makes perfect. This is also Kyle's whole plan. Through this proposal, he gained a huge reputation in Slytherin. At the same time, he caused trouble for Dumbledore, delayed his actions, and bought time for Kyle's growth. With his strength that crushed his peers, and Black who might stand behind him, Kyle will undoubtedly become the leader of the younger generation of Slytherin. After that, as long as he crushed Voldemort a few times, Kyle will have a firm foothold in the magic world, and can even compete with old Dumbledore. If this continues, within 10 years, with Kyle's strength, he will be able to completely control Slytherin. Unfortunately, man's plans are not as good as God's. After all, Dumbledore is the son of destiny of the previous era. It seems that God is trying to help him. Fudge's arrival completely disrupted his plan. Chapter 63 Dumbledore and Fudge's building collapses. At the same time as the year-end dinner began, in the office of the Minister of Magic, the triumphant Fudge was being interviewed by the Daily Prophet. This was the third time that Fudge had been interviewed by the Daily Prophet after the attack on Hogwarts. In his words, it was to strengthen communication with the public and build public confidence at this important moment. In the 7 days after the attack, Fudge was not idle for a single day. He accepted interviews, visited nobles, and won over neutrals. Since Fudge came to power, there has never been a day as full of hope as now. Because the mountain above his head has fallen. Since he became the Minister of Magic, he has been worried about Dumbledore all the time, fearing that he would snatch his position as minister. He fulfilled every request of Dumbledore with all his heart, and tried to please every powerful noble. This Minister of Magic was made into a nanny for Dumbledore and the nobles. Fortunately, such days are gone forever. Dumbledore made a stupid move himself. Everyone knows that Voldemort was defeated by Harry Potter, who was still a baby, 11 years ago. Dumbledore, who had made a big mistake, wanted to pin the blame on Voldemort. This caused his reputation in the wizarding world to plummet, and at the same time, it also lifted the sword of Damocles hanging over Fudge's head. Dumbledore's remarks confirmed the rumors that he was an old madman, which gave Fudge hope of getting rid of Dumbledore's influence. For this reason, he has been trying hard to put on a show these days, and even visited Azkaban to prove to the public that the wizarding world is safe. The attack on Hogwarts was entirely due to Dumbledore's wanton behavior. Mr. Fudge. Fudge was a little distracted by the good life, but fortunately, the voice of the young reporter in front of him woke him up. Oh, Miss Walls, I'm sorry. The Hogwarts incident has made me a little uneasy recently. I have to keep thinking about where there are security loopholes in the wizarding world. You know, I had to go to Azkaban for this. Although it turned out to be extremely safe there. The Dementors and the Ministry of Magic's protective measures guarded the isolated island, but the environment in Azkaban was really unfriendly. Especially to confirm whether there were any abnormalities among the Death Eaters. You know, Headmaster Dumbledore claimed that the Dark Lord had returned. Although this was nonsense, in order not to leave any security loopholes, I still went to inspect the deepest part of Azkaban. It turned out that the return of the Dark Lord was just a lie made up by Headmaster Dumbledore. He was old after all. The old man no longer had the courage to admit his mistakes. The Death Eaters did not have any abnormalities and stayed quietly in their cells. But that was the territory of the Dementors after all. Even though they had tried to restrain their influence, I still couldn't sleep well for several nights. You are really working hard, Mr. Minister. So can you share your experiences in Azkaban? Haha, Miss Walls, this is just my job. You know, ensuring the safety of the people can't be said to be hard. As for Azkaban, of course I have to talk about it. Because of the remarks made by Headmaster Dumbledore, the people are in a panic and are very worried about the safety of Azkaban and the Death Eaters who will take the opportunity to cause trouble. But we all know now that this is just a trick played by Dumbledore, and Azkaban is extremely safe. It is the safest prison in the world. Even if the Dark Lord himself is imprisoned, he can't escape from prison. This is exactly what I want to tell the people when I visited Azkaban this time and accepted an interview with the Daily Prophet. You are extremely safe. Dementors are loyal allies of the Ministry of Magic. At the same time, a large number of auras and strikers are distributed along the coast. The people must believe that the Ministry of Magic has enough capabilities and will definitely allow everyone to continue to live a stable and happy life. Mr. Minister, thank you for your speech. Would you mind telling me what the Ministry of Magic is doing to track down the murderer at Hogwarts? Ms. Walls, these things should not be published in the newspapers, but Before Fudge could finish his words, Senior Undersecretary Dolores Umbridge walked in with a pale face. Fudge could even see her trembling lips. Minister. Mr. Minister, I have something to report to you in private. Fudge looked at Umbridge with dissatisfaction, but still followed him to the side. What's wrong, Dolores? What makes you so nervous? Minister. Mr. Minister. It's okay, Dolores. Say what you have to say quickly. You are a senior undersecretary. Why are you so hesitant? What's the matter? Dumbledore is playing tricks again. Dolores, you have to keep calm. Dumbledore is finished. No one is willing to believe what he says anymore. Fudge interrupted Umbridge impatiently. I even suddenly felt that such a panic-stricken person was not suitable for such an important position as the senior deputy minister. Hearing this, Umbridge gritted her teeth. Although her lips were still trembling, she still spoke intermittently. Mr. Minister, it's Azkaban. The Death Eaters rioted. They shouted that the master was back, and Sirius, he disappeared in the chaos. Umbridge's words made Fudge's eyes go black. The last consciousness seemed to hear Umbridge shouting, "Mr. Minister? Got, someone come." Mr. Minister fainted. The Ministry of Magic was in chaos. Kyle didn't have time to remove the first brick of Dumbledore's building. Fudge, a pig teammate, collapsed his own building. Thanks to Fingai Shanayu, Shianranai, Tschen, Yang Iron, Kinksa Jingdu, Xios Hayan, Sen Yang Kong, Jafeng Sijian Yufeng's Hiren, a certain lamp in the group, book friends with the last number 2589, Samba, Mengdi, Mafengshan, and the monthly votes. Thanks to MMMDDDZZZZZZ. In the other place, the starlight is eternal. The man who rides the wind with the sword of the gale. The sky is windless. Frosty Bones, Scarecrow, the wolf fang will bite you. Two people walking 86. Tschen, watching of dream, listening to the rain and wind tower. Book friend with the last number 8716. Dreams and fantasies. Lanky, heaven of blood. Licorice radiator, cute Xiaoxing classmate. Night god Lengjuan, sky cloud of the soul. Idol to explosion. Azuan X, book friend with the last number 1560. Scum Vulcan, Phoenix of Chu. I'm the spirit behind. I said this book should be 404. Lu Yulu, Sen Yang Kong, Kisik Baev. I just want to eat melon seeds quietly. Ku I do. Stars witness the years. Post 80s enjoy loneliness. Ideal 97. And the recommendation votes cast by the stubborn stone. Chapter 64 Chaos. Kyle didn't know about the chaos in the Ministry of Magic. The Slytherins were particularly excited after the end of year dinner. The little snakes barely maintained their pride on the surface until they entered the cellar, where they completely indulged themselves. In the evening, a grand celebration was held in the Slytherin cellar. The prefects ordered the elves to prepare a large number of delicacies, and the excited little snakes simply held a buffet dinner in the cellar. The enchanted instruments played the music by themselves, and the happy little snakes danced while drinking the secretly obtained butterbeer. As a hero in the eyes of the little snakes, Kyle did not join their carnival. Instead, he sat on the sofa alone, thinking about his own plan. Unlike the excitement of the little snakes, Kyle knew that the situation was not as good as they imagined. It is true that Slytherin is currently in an advantageous position, but this is only temporary. Once there is a change in the magic world, such as Voldemort jumping out to cause chaos again, then Dumbledore, who is now denounced by the public, will be quickly carried back. As for the little wizards who died in the attack, apart from their relatives, will no one still remember them? This is a reality. Dumbledore is powerful, and the public is willing to believe that he can protect them from Voldemort, but the dead little wizard cannot. This makes Kyle tread on thin ice. He only hopes that Voldemort will not do anything weird in front of the school board. What happened at the dinner tonight will definitely be the headline of the Daily Prophet tomorrow morning. Kyle can only pray that Voldemort has the habit of reading newspapers. Don't let Kyle try to deal with Dumbledore in the front, and Voldemort will be a pig teammate in the back, causing trouble for him every other day. And Fudge. Kyle knows Fudge's situation very well, and he also knows how much he wants to get rid of Dumbledore's influence. Kyle has already handed the knife to him. It depends on whether Fudge can operate successfully and take the opportunity to take Dumbledore's position as the chief wizard of the Wizengamot. When Kyle was thinking quietly, he didn't notice that Daphne Greengrass was sitting next to him. It didn't disturb Kyle's thinking, but just drank his drink quietly, listened to music comfortably, and beat the rhythm from time to time. Occasionally, she tilted her head to look at Kyle. The girl's golden hair and delicate face made her look like a doll. Kyle also felt Daphne's gaze at her. He raised his glass and said leisurely, "Good evening, Miss Greengrass. This glass is for you. Thank you for your support at the dinner." Kyle took a sip of the butterbeer in the glass. With a cheerful smile on his face, his mind began to turn rapidly. The only time Kyle and Greengrass had ever met was when they tested the toy puppet last time. At that time, Greengrass was elegant and proud, attracting all the attention of the audience like Aphrodite. After that, Kyle and Aphrodite were like two parallel lines, without any communication. It is true that her appearance is very outstanding, and she is sought after by all the boys in the lower grades. There are even boys from other colleges who run to Greengrass to show their feathers. Unfortunately, these certainly cannot attract Kyle. Whether in the past life or this life, Kyle is a dedicated man, and he has always liked young girls around 20 years old. Greengrass is too young. Lady Daphne Greengrass also raised her glass, took a sip, and said crisply, "Call me Daphne Senior. You are the protagonist of today's celebration, and you have achieved a great victory tonight. But why don't you look very happy?" Daphne's voice was playful and cute, but the question she asked was not as naive as she appeared. Obviously, she was another young and mature contestant trained by an aristocratic family. Without directly answering Daphne's question, Kyle looked at the classmates dancing on the dance floor and asked back, "What about you, Miss Daphne? You are also one of the protagonists today. Malfoy and Parkinson are having a lot of fun." The four little guys who stood up to support Kyle today actually belonged to two factions in Slytherin. The Malfoy and Parkinson families were staunch radicals who supported and even worshipped Voldemort. The Greengrass and Zabini families were the mainstays of the neutral faction. Different from the radicalism of Malfoy and Parkinson, these two families were also excluded by Dumbledore and naturally stood against Dumbledore, but they did not agree with Voldemort's ideas and ways of doing things. There are not many neutral people, but their current family heads are definitely rare smart people in the magic world. When Voldemort was chosen as the spokesperson for Slytherin, he saw through Voldemort's wolfish ambitions. So he did not board Voldemort's broken ship at the beginning. This put them in an advantageous position in the post-war settlement. Although they were still inevitably rubbed a layer of oil by the forces behind Dumbledore, they were much better than the radicals such as Malfoy. Daphne was a smart girl, and she obviously heard Kyle's subtext. Kyle was wondering why she stood up to face Dumbledore today, when she was obviously not the same as Malfoy. Senior Kyle, you grew up in the Muggle world, so you must have heard this saying. When a frog is placed in hot water at 40 or 50 degrees, it will immediately jump out of the boiling water and successfully escape, because it cannot bear the sudden high temperature stimulation. But when people put the frog in cold water first, and then slowly heat it up, the result is different. The frog is leisurely in the water, because the water temperature is comfortable at the beginning. When the frog finds that it cannot bear the high temperature, it is already unable to do so, and is boiled to death in the hot water without knowing it. Senior Kyle, do you think Malfoy and the others will be the frogs that suddenly jump out of the hot water? After Daphne finished speaking, the two fell silent. In the distance was cheerful dance music and dancing crowds, but this cheerful atmosphere was far away from the two. Kyle still did not answer Daphne's question, and he could not answer it either. What did Daphne mean? These neutrals have also become pessimistic about their future. Do they want to join forces with the radicals for a final fight? Or are they just optimistic about the success of the radicals and want to bet on them? But why did Daphne tell Kyle these words? One question after another surrounded Kyle's mind, making him dare not answer easily. Most importantly, does Daphne's words represent the attitude of the Greengrass family themselves, or the attitude of the entire neutral faction? The current situation is a mess, and the conversation between the two ended in silence. Tomorrow is the day to leave school. Kyle packed his luggage and decided to go straight to number 12 Grimmauld Place after leaving school tomorrow. Kyle has too many questions to ask those old guys, and the agreement with the Blacks must be carried out as soon as possible. After all, the Dark Lord has returned, and no one knows when Voldemort will discover the changes in the cave. I hope everything goes well for the holiday operation. Kyle lay on the bed, thinking to himself. Thanks to Shang-Chi Mistletoe and book friend with the last number 8649 for their awards. Thanks to Kuido, Yi Shen Leng Juan, Wu Tong Wei Wai, Yu Xiang Kong, book friend with the last number 3268, Sol Xian Iron, book friend with the last number 8649, Lang Ai Bing Ni, book friend with the last number 3799. It's so hard to come up with a name, and the gays are under the dark night starry sky for their recommendation votes. Thanks to Fengai Lashanayu, Xianran Ye, and Chen for their monthly votes. Chapter 65, Time and Fate. Nothing can be done. Early in the morning, Kyle walked to the hall with his suitcase, ready to go directly to the platform to wait for the train after breakfast. At the same time, he was thinking about today's daily profit. He didn't know how the public would view the annual dinner last night. Kyle believed that the reporters would not mind interviewing the critics, senior officials of the Ministry of Magic and representatives of the public overnight. Finally, the army of owls flew into the hall again, and one of them brought Kyle his daily newspaper. Kyle, who was full of expectations, opened the newspaper and almost spurted out the milk in his mouth. The headline of the front page of the newspaper was, "Summoned by the Dark Lord, the Death Eaters of Azkaban rioted collectively to cover Sirius' escape." The subtitle of the newspaper made Kyle helpless. Minister Fudge was panicked and fainted for a time, and the senior deputy minister calmly commanded, "And he might have the appearance of a minister." Kyle really didn't know what to say. Voldemort and Fudge can be said to be Kyle's two natural allies against Dumbledore. "I thought we could cooperate with each other remotely, fight a miracle together, and take Dumbledore away." Unexpectedly, the two big teammates hit Kyle with one kidney shot in the left hand and one backstab in the right hand. Not only did one of them hit Kyle, but he also lifted Dumbledore, who was about to be suppressed by Kyle behind the scenes. Look at what the article says. After Minister Fudge woke up, he immediately exclaimed, "Hurry up and arrange for me to visit Principal Dumbledore at Hogwarts." Kyle was so angry that he wanted to beat him up in person. Is he Fudge a pig? He even visited Principal Dumbledore. With this performance and this psychological quality, he still wants to get rid of Dumbledore's shadow? Get rid of it. It's useless even if he is given a chance. Let's look at the performance of the Ministry of Magic staff. The Daily Report wrote, Minister Fudge asked his confidant in horror, "What does missing mean? Explain to me. What the hell does it mean that Sirius is missing?" And his considerate confidant Martin Goyle immediately replied, "Mr. Minister, missing means that Sirius has escaped. He escaped from Azkaban. He escaped from prison." Kyle could almost imagine Fudge's look at the time when he was hit by a heartbreaking blow. With such an incompetent minister and such stupid staff, how could the public continue to trust the Ministry of Magic? When the public no longer has confidence in the Ministry of Magic, who will they think of? To whom will they transfer their trust? No need to think about it. The wise Fudge has already given the answer. Of course it is Dumbledore. Voldemort and Fudge did this, and it had no effect on themselves. Voldemort continued to live his leisurely life, strolling around the streets, occasionally carrying out terrorist attacks, holding Death Eater gatherings, and being locked up in a small dark room to study how to deal with Dumbledore. Fudge was the same. He quickly rolled to Hogwarts to cling to Dumbledore's thigh. At most, he couldn't get rid of Dumbledore's influence. Anyway, he was a puppet since he took office, and he was used to it. But Kyle's plan was all ruined. If Kyle's plan was implemented smoothly, it would be an exaggeration to say that he would immediately become the CEO, win the beautiful and rich woman, and reach the peak of his life. But his road to leading Slytherin would definitely be much smoother. It's a pity. Kyle can only say that it's fate, and there's nothing he can do. As for whether it would be disadvantageous to him if he offended Dumbledore severely at the dinner party, Kyle said he didn't care. Kyle was just a student. What could Dumbledore do to him? At most, he would be careful not to be caught when he went out at night in the future. What else could Dumbledore do to him? Anyway, Kyle was not interested in competing for the positions of prefect and chairman. As for the cold reception and hostility of the professors headed by Dumbledore, Kyle said that he was thick-skinned anyway and couldn't feel it. It was a pity for his carefully designed plan. Kyle originally wanted to be a pig in the spotlight and use the turbulence of the current situation to become the king or queen on the chessboard. Then he would work hard to become the person standing outside the chessboard to play chess. Just like what Voldemort did before. He turned from a chess piece into a flag bearer and then threw the person who once controlled him onto the chessboard to charge for him. Unfortunately, it was time and fate. The current situation forced Kyle to give up the idea of taking shortcuts. It's very simple to get things done. Kill Voldemort. And when Voldemort was crushed for the first time, he must be the absolute main force. Then publicize this result and become the new Terminator of the Demon King, the new hope of the magic world, and the new savior. That's right, since he can't follow Voldemort's old path, he can only follow the path that Dumbledore has taken. One advantage of doing this is that he can directly tell the radicals of Slytherin, Voldemort is no longer good, follow me, Kyle. Unfortunately, Kyle will not have much time left, at most this holiday, and the next school year. Because Voldemort will be killed by Dumbledore again in the next school year. Dumbledore's reputation is bound to be even stronger, and Slytherin's power will definitely be hit again. Kyle has regarded Slytherin as his base and the support group for building the floating city, so he can only do his best to prevent all this from happening. He can only crush Voldemort before Dumbledore. Kyle was silently thinking about new plans all the way back to the Muggle world. It was not until he entered number 12 Grimmauld Place that Kyle simply figured out a little clue. Young master, welcome back to the old house. Creature has prepared hot water for you. You can take a bath first. Creature has also prepared a sumptuous dinner. Young master, you can also tell me what you like to eat. Creature will prepare it now. Creature was obviously very excited to see Kyle return to number 12 Grimmauld Place. While taking Kyle's coat, he made arrangements for Kyle with an exaggerated expression. In the whole old house, Creature may be the only one whose feelings for Kyle are the most sincere and pure. Ever since he promised to bring back Regulus' body, Creature has been extremely enthusiastic towards him and completely recognized him as a young master. As for the portraits, they can only be regarded as collaborators, and Kyle dare not turn his back to them. Just eat what you prepare in the evening. Creature, I'm going to take a bath first. After saying that, Kyle returned to his room on the second floor. The dinner was extremely sumptuous, and the huge long table was filled with silver candlesticks with white candles lit on them. All the tableau was also made of silver, and the carvings on it were very simple and obviously valuable. Creature has been serving Kyle, responding to his call at any time. It was not until the end of the meal that Kyle strolled into the basement and prepared to ask the portraits for some information, and Creature was reluctant to leave. Good evening, everyone. Kyle greeted the portraits with a smile, and it was completely impossible to tell that he had just experienced the failure of an important plan. Good evening, Kyle. I'm glad to see you're not depressed by the latest news. It was Phineas who answered. He was well informed and already knew what Kyle had been through, and it seemed that he had shared it with the other portraits. Harry Potter is Blade's favorite set of books. Maybe Blade is ignorant. This is the first novel Blade has read that combines the magical world with the modern world. In 2000, Blade was 10 years old. At that time, the first 3 Harry Potter books were launched in China. Blade finished the first 3 books in one go, and then began to look forward to the 4th, 5th, and 6th books. After finishing the last book, Blade began to look forward to J.K. Rowling seeing that the novel sold so well, and launching a sequel. Unfortunately, this wait lasted for 10 years. It was not until these years that The Cursed Child and Where to Find Fantastic Beasts were published one after another. Until now, Blade still thinks that Harry Potter is a magical book, a magnum opus, a magical novel that subverts the past, and a novel that has established a school of thought. Rowling depicts a world of fantasy, an incredible world that has never been imagined by the world. Some book friends may know that Blade wrote his own book because a certain book was updated too slowly, but in fact, this is just an opportunity. We live in a boring world without miracles. There is no magic, no cultivation, no martial arts, no Dao Zan who can turn his fighting spirit into a horse, and no powerful people who are so terrifying. The magic world described by Rowling is really fascinating. Blade believes that all book friends have imagined what it would be like to live in the magic world. Blade cannot personally experience such a world, but Blade can use the pen in his hand to write the story he imagines. I'm very glad that Blade's fantasy has received support from many book friends, and it is this support that has allowed Blade to write until now. I was in a trance and wrote 150,000 words without noticing. You know, Blade has a headache when writing a year-end summary because every year the leader will ask for new ideas. This paragraph is not a speech for the release of the book, Sanjiang's speech or something like that. Blade is just a chatterbox and wants to chat with everyone. Finally, Blade once again thanks all the book friends for their support. Blade has nothing to repay, so he can only try his best to write a wonderful novel. Thanks to the book friend with the last number 3268 for the reward. Thanks to Zabizan Zhi, Ujan Shan, Manjusaka, the wolf who loves sheep 1, Azuan X, and the man who rides the wind with the sword of the swift wind for their recommendation votes. Chapter 66, Arrogant Thoughts. Phineas is a typical Slytherin, full of intrigues and schemes, and very cunning. When he mentioned the dinner party, as soon as they met, Kyle already had the answer to his attitude towards the blacks. Because if the blacks were not interested in it, or were very disgusted with this practice, then Phoenix would not mention it. Unless Kyle's approach met their needs, and looking at Phoenix's relaxed and happy look, it was obvious that Kyle's approach was exactly what they wanted. Kyle was thinking, what can the blacks get from this? Let alone others. Phineas is a lib, and every expression of this kind of person is conveying information. The smile on their face sometimes conveys their goodwill, and sometimes it hides the malice in their hearts. Kyle couldn't guess what they were calculating. However, Phineas was also an extremely smart person. Kyle didn't need to say anything, he had already guessed Kyle's thoughts. At this time, Phineas smiled calmly at Kyle and asked, so, what you have done these days is to build momentum for yourself? Kyle thought for a moment and said, that's right. You are better than I thought. Phineas said with emotion, when I was your age, I was not as good as you. Not better, just a little bolder. Kyle said, although I don't know how you think, but you must have made sufficient preparations. Phineas said, the situation is getting more and more complicated now. Have you ever thought that standing in line so early may make your future development difficult? I have thought about it. Kyle looked up at everything around him. The characters and the portraits on the walls around him were whispering, and there were some strange things in the room. The container with legs like a kettle was wandering aimlessly in the basement. This was a magic version of a dehumidifier. The spout of the kettle kept sucking air into its stomach, and the water vapor in the air would be retained in the kettle. When the water was almost full, the long-legged kettle would walk to the bathroom by itself to pour out the water. The automatic broom and dustbin worked in harmony to clean the dust in the basement, while the magic rag ran quickly in the room, as if it was chased by a dog, leaving a trail of watermarks. Such wonderful things only appeared in dreams in the previous life, so he was greedy for all of this. He wanted to stand at the top of the magic hall, and at the same time, stand at the top of the magic world. He lowered his head and smiled at Phineas and said, it was actually quite pleasant to get along with you these few times. Although you old guys are full of calculations, you have provided me with a lot of information after all. You kid can actually think of bringing Regulus back at this time, so the Black family will also fulfill their promise. You can ask for anything now. Phineas said. Kyle thought for a while. Tell me some interesting news in the magic world recently. Don't you want Black to stand up for you? Phineas smiled. Not for the time being. I know exactly what I'm doing. As long as I move towards my goal, there will be people who recognize me standing behind me. Okay, I have always liked your confidence and courage. Some gossip information is a gift from us to you. It is not worth taking as a condition for bringing Regulus back. Thank you. Kyle said that night. Kyle stayed in the basement for a long time, listening to the portraits telling the latest gossip information. It was not until nearly midnight that Kyle returned to his room alone and lay on the bed thinking quietly. Time passed little by little. The moon fell from the sky to the horizon. The rustling sound of automatic cleaning tools cleaning the old house reminded Kyle that a new day had begun. Kyle, who had not slept all night, sorted out the recent intelligence and made some preliminary plans for his future actions. If his ideas were spoken out, people would think he was crazy, but this was the most beneficial and safest plan for him. In the morning, Kyle was sitting in the restaurant eating breakfast. Mrs. Black walked to the portrait opposite the dining table and waited for him slowly. After Kyle ate the last bite of food and wiped his mouth with a napkin, Mrs. Black said, "Didn't you sleep well last night?" Kyle looked at Mrs. Black calmly with two dark circles under his eyes. The old woman didn't wait for Kyle to answer and said, "Do you want to postpone the exploration to tomorrow? Black has been waiting for a long time, so don't worry about this day." Kyle tidied up his slightly messy clothes and said straight to the point, "I'm not in a hurry for Black. Although I have black blood in my body, for now, this is just a deal." Mrs. Black smiled. You are straightforward, but why are you so anxious to do these things? You are unwilling to be inferior to others, and you are madly pursuing power. What is all this for? As soon as these words came out, Kyle clearly felt that the expressions of the other blacks who were listening were different. The atmosphere became serious, and even a big cat dozing in the portrait raised its head to look at him. Kyle had contact with blacks many times, but he had never told them what he was going to do. What the blacks saw was only his greed for knowledge and his extreme rejection of being controlled by black. But what exactly did this little guy want? The blacks had no idea. What's the point of talking about such a long-term thing now? Just take the current path step by step. Kyle smiled. If I succeed, you will naturally know what I want. If I fail, there is no point in talking about it now. That makes sense. Mrs. Black smiled. This time the smile was no longer proud and crazy. As Kyle began to prepare to bring Regulus back, Mrs. Black was becoming more rational. Besides creature accompanying us, what else do we need to prepare? Mrs. Black continued. Voldemort is back, and no one knows whether there will be any new changes in the cave. Not for the time being. This is just a preliminary exploration. If something unexpected happens, I will withdraw immediately. I know. Mrs. Black nodded. What the blacks said to him was completely within his expectations. Kyle's actions were extremely important to them, and these old guys would certainly pay close attention to it. Kyle stood in the middle of the living room with his suitcase packed long ago. The photo frames around him were full of blacks. Kyle, don't be stubborn. If there is any danger, you must ask Creature to bring you back as soon as possible. Sirius warned Kyle, and the blacks around him also reminded him to pay attention to safety. This was not because he cared about Kyle, but because he was worried that, if something happened to him, Regulus would be completely hopeless. Before leaving, Orion promised, Kyle, after all, you have black blood in your body, and the books in the basement should be open to you. Now, can you tell us what you want to exchange for rescuing Regulus? Kyle suddenly laughed. Since you want to know, then go and prepare. I will bring Regulus back. In return, you have to find a way to revive the Horcrux. I want to revive him and control him. Chapter 67. First exploration of the cave. Resurrection and control Voldemort. Kyle said it lightly, but he succeeded in breaking the defense of the blacks. Sirius used up all his life skills to control himself from cursing, and repeated Kyle's request with a toothache expression. Kyle had expected their reaction, and replied with a slightly curled lip, yes, what, can't you do it? I can do it, you big head ghost. Sirius didn't say this, but Kyle could guess what the blacks were thinking with his toes. Kyle, isn't your goal a little too high? Although the blacks are not afraid of Voldemort, it's only because, as long as we hide in the old house, Voldemort can't do anything to us. Do you have any misunderstandings about the blacks' strength? Although Sirius' words were very euphemistic, Kyle understood that he was asking Kyle if he was mentally ill. The attitude of the blacks clearly told Kyle that this was impossible, but Kyle didn't take it to heart. Ladies and gentlemen, standing here are the greatest spell masters, potion masters, and alchemy masters in the history of the wizarding world. They are also the most outstanding experts in magic rituals, curses, and contracts. And what you have to deal with is just a fragment of a soul locked in a pendant box. Is that difficult? There is no resurrected Horcrux, just a lamb that cannot move, cannot cast magic, and you can do whatever you want to it. Will even this scare the blacks? Kyle looked at the blacks with amusement, but the portrait of this group of experienced people would not buy it. A black looked at Kyle with disdain. Kyle, don't try to provoke us. Your method is too immature. You underestimate Voldemort's methods. We may find a way to resurrect the Horcruxes, but it is almost impossible to control him. Black's words did not make Kyle retreat, but continued. Maybe I didn't express myself clearly. I don't want to resurrect him first, and then control him with the Imperious Curse. This way is self-destructive. My plan is to control him first, and then resurrect him. A scarred soul fragment is of course 10,000 times easier to deal with than a resurrected Voldemort. Whether it is the Imperious Curse, the Master-Slave Contract, the Master Recognition Ceremony, or the Restraint Ceremony, it is impossible to use it on the resurrected Voldemort. But what about this soul fragment? Use memory magic to plant the thought of submission to me in his brain. Use magic circles to imprint slave marks on the fragments. And there are also methods for taming and controlling magical creatures. Even the methods that wizards use to create house elves. Gentlemen, this is just a soul fragment that is powerless to resist. I believe you can research 100 ways to control him and make him surrender. Kyle's words were like the devil's low hum, tempting the blacks to imagine what magic and rituals could be used. Yes, Kyle was right. Although Voldemort had cast countless powerful black magic on the ornament box, it was not unbreakable. After these protective means were broken, Voldemort's soul fragment was just a lamb to be slaughtered. Imagine if Voldemort's 7 soul fragments could be used to make 7 house elves to pass on. How powerful would the black family's heritage become? The prospect that Kyle described to the blacks forced the group of portraits to pay attention to Kyle's proposal. In the end, the portraits still succumbed, unable to resist the temptation of the 7 Voldemort-branded house elves, and agreed to Kyle's request. Only Creature seemed very frustrated throughout the whole process, as if he was worried that the new Voldemort elf would take his job. One Voldemort was sweeping the floor, one was mopping the floor, one was cleaning the house, one was preparing lunch, one was washing clothes, one was mowing the lawn, and one was supervising. Creature couldn't beat them, and couldn't rob them. He could only stand by helplessly and watch the Voldemorts snatch the favor of their master. Just thinking about this scene made Creature heartbroken. The cruel future filled Creature's eyes with tears, and he stood by and sobbed quietly. Creature's appearance gave Kyle a headache. The ability and loyalty of house elves made them the right-hand man of the wizard family. But this neurotic really made Kyle unable to complain. The etiquette ingrained in their bones made the blacks hold back and immediately start discussing Voldemort's elves, or the idea of keeping Voldemort in their homes. They all stood behind Mrs. Black and stared at Kyle. Creature, remember all my instructions, right? Remember it, young master. Take me around the cave first. After confirming it's safe, accompany me to observe the vampire magic circle. Then take me into the cave and place the forward base. Once the young master sends a signal, Creature will immediately take me back to the old house. Creature, whose name was Colt, tried to straighten his chest and repeated Kyle's request. Although Creature didn't quite understand the Muggle term forward base, he still tried hard to remember it. Okay. Kyle snapped his fingers. Then Creature, let's go. Everyone, wait for my good news. Hearing this, Creature put his hand on Kyle's arm. Kyle felt himself spinning, as if he was squeezed in a thick rubber tube. He couldn't breathe, and every part of his body was squeezed, which was beyond his endurance. Then, just when he thought he was suffocating, the invisible tube suddenly burst open. He stood in the cool darkness, breathing in the fresh, salty air. Although he had known that being apparated was not a good experience, Kyle had underestimated how terrible it would be. They could smell the sea from where they stood and hear the sound of the waves. Kyle looked out at the moonlit sea and the starry night sky in the distance, and a cold breeze blew his hair. They stood between several tall black rocks that protruded from the sea, and the waves rolled and foamed under his feet. Turning his head and looking back, there was a cliff behind him, with a steep rock wall falling straight down, and it was so dark that he couldn't see its face clearly. There were also several large rocks there, such as the one they were standing on now, which seemed to have fallen off the front of the cliff at some time in the past. The surroundings were bare and desolate. Apart from the vast sea and rocks, there was no tree, no grass or beach. Little master, how are you feeling? Creature asked with concern. I'm fine. Kyle answered, but he was panting loudly. Young master, this place is still some distance from the cave. We have to enter the sea and pass through a passage in the sea before we can reach the cave. Kyle looked at the dark sea water and shook his head helplessly. Old Volt is really good at finding places. He can even find such a hidden cave. Helplessly, Kyle followed Creature and jumped into the sea. They swam towards the dark crack on the rock surface. Kyle held the wand in his mouth and adopted a perfect breaststroke posture. The seawater was extremely cold. After being soaked in water, his clothes became swollen and heavy, pulling him straight down. Kyle took a few deep breaths and smelled the pungent smell of salt and seaweed. He regretted not letting Creature cast a warming spell on him. Soon, the crack turned into a dark secret passage. Kyle could see that the secret passage would definitely be filled with seawater when the tide rose. The muddy rock walls on both sides were only less than 3 meters wide. A little further in, the secret passage turned left, and Kyle saw that it stretched all the way to the deepest part of the cliff. Kyle continued to swim forward with Creature, his numb fingers scraping against the rough wet rocks. At the same time, the two were always alert to possible threats. Then, he saw Creature in front of him stand up from the water. Kyle swam there and found that there were steps leading to a large cave. He climbed the steps with great effort, and water rushed down from his wet clothes. They finally walked out of the sea. The air around them was silent and cold, and his wet clothes made him shiver. Kyle and Creature walked forward cautiously until they were sure that no one had been here for a long time, and then they felt relieved. Creature, dry my clothes quickly. I bet Voldemort must have built the cave in the summer. Otherwise, after a few times of tossing like this, he would lose half his life without the help of old Dumbledore. After Creature dried his clothes, Kyle ordered him to cast Loomis. Creature had to do everything for him, which made him hate the Ministry of Magic's underage magic restrictions even more. As the fluorescent lights flickered, Kyle finally saw the magic circle engraved on the wall. It was huge and magnificent, and at the same time it had the vicissitudes of time and seawater immersion. Kyle looked at the magic circle and gradually became excited, because this was an arrangement that Kyle had never seen before, more concise and more efficient. This means that the magic circle can carry more functions and can show more powerful effects. Creature, you really took me into the treasure, Kyle murmured, staring at the magic circle without blinking. Thanks to Zaoshian, Lali research expert, and for the monthly votes. Thanks to the coffee shop on the corner, the cute Xiaoxing classmate. I love Jiangaya, Kui do, Yuhan Yuan Shishianzan, Yishen Leng Yuan, Azuan X. 8 is enjoy loneliness, fields, and sunsets, waking, red dust painting, and you know Sky for the recommendation votes. Chapter 68 Codename, Frontier Base. Creature knew that Kyle was not really talking to him, so he stood quietly aside and did not disturb Kyle. Kyle looked at the magic circle greedily, trying to remember every detail of it. After a long time, Kyle took his eyes off the magic circle. Creature, I have to say that, although the you-know-who is not very smart, he is really talented in magic and very powerful. I can guarantee that this magic circle was designed by him. Otherwise, I would not have never seen it in the records. After all, he entered Voldemort's lair and came to steal things. Kyle did not dare to call Voldemort's name here. Instead, he used the you-know-who instead, just like the people in the magic world. Young master, is this magic circle important to you? Of course, Creature. Let's not talk about the design ideas of this magic circle. Just this magic circle itself can have countless variations. This part that requires blood is actually a sacrifice ceremony. Think about it. If the blood is replaced with something else, what effect will it have? Kyle's words made Creature a little confused. The magic of the elves is innate, which makes them have no talent in magic research. Well, young master, well, can we replace the blood with urine? Yes, that's it. As long as the quantity is increased, others will never be able to get in. Young master, you are smarter than the mysterious man. Creature's words made Kyle completely speechless. Why didn't I realize before that Creature's brain circuit was so clear? It's replaced with eyes, internal organs and the like. Kyle explained weakly, the purpose of this magic circle is not to block other people's restricted areas, but to make the people who enter the state no longer intact. After saying that, without waiting for Creature to reply, he continued to order, okay Creature, take me into the cave. Creature was a little frustrated when he heard Kyle's answer. In fact, Creature thought his method was also very good. Who can have so much at a time? Right, as long as this magic circle is placed, others will definitely not be able to get in. You can even change the effect of the magic circle to trap people. As long as you can't meet this requirement, you can't get out. Creature thinks this is a genius idea, but it's a pity that the young master doesn't seem to agree. The elf put his hand on Kyle again. Young master, get ready, I'm going to apparate. After another breathless squeeze and tumbling, Kyle entered the interior of the cave. The interior of the cave was a very strange scene. They were standing on the shore of a large black lake. The lake was extremely wide and boundless. Kyle couldn't even see the other side in the distance. The cave they were in was very high, and he couldn't see the top of the cave, even if he looked up. In the distance, as if in the center of the lake, a hazy green light flickered, reflecting in the dead lake water below. Except for that green light, the surroundings were completely dark, and the penetrability of this green light was not as strong as Kyle expected. The darkness here seemed to be denser and heavier than usual. "Let's go forward," Kyle whispered. Creature immediately led the way and warned, "Young master, be careful not to step into the water, and follow me closely. This is what the mysterious man asked me to do when he brought me here." Creature walked around the lake shore, and Kyle followed closely behind him. Their footsteps echoed on the narrow rocks by the lake. They walked for a long time, but the surrounding scenery did not change at all. On one side was the rough cave wall, and on the other side was the endless smooth black lake. In the center of the lake was flickering a mysterious green light. This silence was depressing and unsettling. Creature seemed unable to bear this silence, and took the initiative to speak. "Young master, the Horcrux is hidden on the island in the middle of the lake." The mysterious man and Master Regulus took a small boat to the middle of the lake. At that time, the young master kept warning Creature not to touch the lake water. "Young master, you must take the young master home. The young master is really good and kind." Creature talked a lot along the way, and it seemed that the closer he got to his young master, the more uneasy he felt. After a long time, Creature finally stopped. "Young master, this is it. The mysterious man and Master Regulus summoned the boat from here." Kyle looked around. There was no difference between this place and other places. There was only dark lake water and rocks. It was really hard for Creature to remember it so clearly. However, Creature's reminder also made Kyle discover the difference here. Using magic will definitely leave traces. Kyle couldn't remember which book he had seen this sentence in, but this sentence directly pointed to the essence of magic. Kyle's hand slowly moved in the air, as if trying to find and grab something invisible. Ho ho. After a few seconds, Kyle finally found something. He closed his hands and grabbed something invisible in the air. Kyle slowly moved towards the lake until the tip of his shoe with a copper buckle moved to the outermost edge of the rock. The hand that was clenched in the air did not move, and the other hand raised the wand and tapped his fist with the tip of the wand. He did not use any magic, but simply let the magic flow into something invisible. Immediately, a thick green copper chain suddenly emerged from the depths of the lake and jumped towards Kyle's clenched fist. Kyle tapped the chain with his wand again, and the chain began to slide through his fist like a snake, coiling on the ground. The sound of ding dong hit the rock wall and made a loud echo. The chain pulled something up from the bottom of the dark lake. The bow of a small boat suddenly emerged from the lake like a ghost, emitting a green light like a chain, floating towards the lake shore where Kyle and Creature were standing, almost without causing a ripple. Seeing the boat appear, Creature was obviously excited. "Young master, this is the boat." At that time, Creature and Master Regulus took this boat to the center of the lake. "Young master, you have to be careful. Don't let the lake water splash on you when you are on the boat." That's what the young master told Creature. Kyle didn't take Creature's words to heart, but asked back, "What are you going to do on the island?" This question stumped Creature. Go, what are you going to do on the island? Yes, we don't have to go to the island. Kyle's words woke Creature up, because the previous 2 times they entered the cave and then took a boat to the island. This made him fall into a strange circle of thinking. Then, "Young master, what are we going to do now?" Kyle didn't answer directly, but picked up the box he had been carrying with him. "Creature, aren't you curious about what the forward base is? Now you can see it." After saying that, he laid the box flat on the ground. The originally hard box now became like a cloth bag full of elasticity. The box mouth was constantly twisted and stretched, and finally, a huge iron guy walked out of it. It was the latest puppet that Kyle had spent half a semester making. Codename, Forward Base. Thanks to Mugsucho and Yeheo and Lali Research Expert for their monthly votes. Thanks to Watch of Dream, Book Friend Last Number 2434, Fields and Sunsets, Deep Sky, Warm Cold, People in the World Get the Way, CUILUIAO, Book Friend Last Number 2434. Soul of the Sky. I just made a random complaint, and the recommendation votes. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69. Action begins. This. Young Master Kyle. What is this? Creature looked at the huge monster in front of him. His eyes almost popped out. He asked Kyle stutteringly, but his face was almost close to the forward base. He looked extremely excited, no longer cautious, and it was obvious that this big guy gave him great confidence. No wonder Creature looked like a leopard. Kyle's puppet was subversive in the magic world. It's not that there are no puppets in the magic world, but all the puppets in the magic world are in animal or human form. The size is basically more than one person tall. According to Kyle's observation, the many armors in the corridors of Hogwarts are actually puppets defending the castle. These small puppets in the magic world that are one person tall are really little brothers in front of Kyle's forward base. The forward base was made much larger than originally imagined, 3 meters high, 6 meters long and wide. This puppet was eventually made into a safe house with legs. Kiki. At this time, a sound similar to the transformation of the Autobots was heard. A small wall in the middle of the forward base was cut open to the side, and an escalator extended from the inside. Creature, come in with me for a tour. Kyle invited Creature, and then walked into the puppet first. The space inside the puppet was about 30 square meters. In the center of the room was the control center of the entire puppet. There were some tables and bookshelves fixed in other places. This puppet not only had the function of a safe house, but also a portable movable simple laboratory. Young Master, is this the puppet you mentioned? Creature felt like he was going crazy, and his mouth was wide open and couldn't close. In addition to walking out of this forward base by himself, what else is similar to a puppet? However, Kyle's expression was very calm. Of course, he expected the shock of others when they saw the puppet. Creature, calm down. You see, the forward base has legs and can move by itself. It's just a little bigger and looks a little weird. It's no big deal. Kyle's words left Creature speechless. Indeed, there is not much difference. Ignoring the surprised Creature, Kyle prepared to start working. Okay, Creature, come over here. Let's try a simple method to see if we can find Regulus. Creature stood beside Kyle obediently. Then Kyle took out his wand and waved it. A 2-meter square iron plate under his feet broke away from the rest and flew up. Creature, who was unprepared, stumbled and almost sat on the ground, holding Kyle's trouser legs tightly. Creature, who fully trusted Kyle, did not panic on his face, but was surprised by everything here. At this time, an opening was opened on the roof of the forward base, which was exactly the same size as the iron plate under his feet. After the iron plate stopped, Kyle said to Creature, Creature, I can't use magic outside of school. Now use the flying spell to summon Regulus. Okay, young master. After that, Creature snapped his fingers and shouted, Little Master Regulus is flying over. With a loud bang like an explosion, a huge white thing jumped up from the dark lake's surface 20 meters away. Before Creature could see clearly what it was, it disappeared with a splash. Large and deep ripples splashed on the calm water. Creature jumped back in shock and almost fell down again. He turned to Kyle, his heart still pounding wildly. Little master, what is that? Although Creature did not see clearly what it was, he was sure that it was not his little master. Because that big thing was almost the size of a giant. I think if we try to enter the lake, it will definitely do something. Creature turned his head and looked at the lake again. The surface of the lake became like black glass again, bright and smooth. The ripples disappeared at an incredibly fast speed, but Creature's heart was still beating like a drum. Did you know that something like that would happen, little master? I knew that if we blatantly tried to take Regulus away, we would definitely encounter something. But I didn't expect the you-know-who could do this. Kyle said, looking at the calm yet menacing lake. Kyle was sure that it was the corpse of a giant, which was made into an inferi by Voldemort to guard his Horcrux. What else could be in the lake besides giants? Werewolves, vampires, trolls. These dark creatures have a high affinity with inferi. The strength of the inferi, after being made into inferi, far exceeds that of ordinary people, or even wizards. And besides inferi, are there no other means of protection? This is not the game that Dumbledore prepared for Harry last school year. Water monsters, water goblins, water ghosts, giant pythons and ghosts can all be encountered in this lake. At this time, Creature had gotten rid of the shock he had just received and stood there a little frustrated. Okay, Creature, don't be so frustrated. Didn't we expect that things would not be so simple? Young master, of course I know it won't be so simple, but I'm still frustrated. If the you-know-whose magic was a little worse, and the magic circle here collapsed by itself after a long time, how great it would be. Kyle wanted to laugh at Creature's words, but seeing the sadness on his face, he couldn't say anything to tease him. He just said lightly, prepare for the summoning ceremony. So the two of them got busy again. Kyle took out the prepared magic materials and began to draw the magic circle for summoning on the roof of the forward base. And Creature also took out the corresponding instruments for the ceremony. Candlesticks, candles, the skull of a bull-dodge bird, and a bottle of blood. If it is an ordinary summoning ceremony, the requirements are very simple. A candle, a random candlestick, and a piece of material related to space. Then describe the thing to be summoned. Only the most basic materials are needed to draw the magic circle. But Regulus's situation is too complicated. I don't know how many spells Voldemort has cast on this lake, and how many magic circles have been engraved on it. And Regulus himself is in the ritual of transformation of the corpse. These will become obstacles to the summoning ceremony. So the things prepared by Creature are specially made according to Kyle's instructions. The candlestick is made of mithril, and the summoning magic runes are also engraved on the candlestick to enhance the effect of the ceremony. The candle is mixed with soul-guiding grass and banshee's tears to enhance the induction of Regulus' soul. The bull escape bird is born with the ability to apparate. This bull escape bird is also the leader of a tribe and can assist the ritual in breaking through space. And the last bottle of blood. It is Kyle's own blood. The blood of blood relatives is the last insurance prepared by Kyle. This will greatly strengthen the connection between the magic ritual and Regulus. Kyle worked for a long time and finally drew the magic circle. Put the candlestick into the node of the magic circle and light the candle. Put the skull in the center of the magic circle, and then pour your own blood on the skull. Creature stood nervously outside the magic circle, staring at Kyle intently. After the preparations were completed, Kyle took out his wand and began to chant slowly. Thanks to Liuzianchiensi, Axuanex, and Yuhuan Yuanchi for their recommendation votes. Chapter 70, Failure at the Last Moment. Kyle muttered something. His voice was trembling because he was using all his magic power. He raised his wand, closed his eyes, and shouted to the night sky, the tears of the witch bloom in the firelight, and he will guide you. The space above the magic circle was like a stone dropped on a calm water surface, shaking out ripples. A strong wind swept around the magic circle. Kyle saw that several small rocks were even blown left and right and squeaked. Creature, who was extremely nervous, saw the light blue smoke produced by the burning candles floating and gathering above the magic circle. The smoke swirled and entangled, weaving into the shape of a door. Kyle was panting slightly, but his expression was much more relaxed. At the beginning of the ceremony, he needed to mobilize all his magic power to activate the magic circle, so he acted so hard at the beginning. Now the magic circle is running and can absorb energy from the void on its own. Now all Kyle needs to do is to guide the ceremony, which makes him much more relaxed. At this time, his voice was deep and powerful. He slowly squatted down and put his hand on the magic circle. Friends of space, sacrifice yourself in the void to clear the barriers for you to return. As Kyle's voice fell, the skull of the bull escape bird floated up. As if being pulled by something, it floated straight to the illusory gate. At the same time, a few cracks appeared on the skull. More and more cracks gradually spread to the entire skull. Silently, the bones of the bull escape bird broke into millions of pieces. These tiny pieces continued to break. Finally, they turned into a handful of powder. The blood of the loved ones, voluntarily donated. He will open the door for you. At this time, Kyle's blood had completely merged with the bone powder of the bull escape bird. As Kyle's voice fell, the red powder rushed towards the gate. The red powder and the light blue smoke merged into one at the moment of contact. The originally ethereal gate had a physical texture at this moment. The ceremony had reached its most critical moment. Creature stood by, staring at the door in the air without blinking. The waves on the door had not calmed down at this time. The smoke that had been floating in disorder seemed to gradually follow a certain pattern and gathered together. Kyle's spell had also reached the last sentence. I call you with my blood, Regulus Black. Kyle's words finally detonated the floating door in front of him. The smoke that had become condensed was violently vibrating, constantly combining and breaking, and vaguely looked like an ocean at one moment and a monster at another. As if to echo the vibrating door, the lake's surface was no longer as smooth as a mirror, but was violently stirring. White heads were everywhere, emerging from the black water. Men, women, and children. They all opened their sunken visionless eyes and floated towards Kyle. A large number of dead bodies emerged from the dark lake. The image of the door had not yet stabilized, but the infernal corpses closest to the lake shore were about to land. Their withered hands grasped the slippery rocks, their hollow misty eyes stared at Kyle, and their tattered clothes, soaked by water, dragged behind them. Their sunken faces were filled with contempt. Kyle was distracted by controlling his box, and the cloth bag-like scene appeared again. 5 puppets more than one person tall came out. This was the second trump card Kyle left for himself. Codename Warrior. The puppets' hands were replaced by 2 huge long swords. The blades were not Kafeng's sharp blades, but sharp saw blades. As long as Kyle needed, the 2 long swords could be turned into 2 electric saws at any time, to chop up all enemies. The waist was equipped with a bearing that could rotate 360 degrees. The legs were given a strong jumping ability, which could quickly jump around the target. The shock caused by landing was enhanced by magic, which would paralyze the limbs of the surrounding enemies and make them unable to move. This puppet also has a tracking function and can lock the target within a certain range. It will charge in front of the target with an indomitable momentum, and the huge kinetic energy was enhanced by magic, which could also paralyze the enemy and make them unable to move. Creature was already trembling with fear from the infantry that were about to land. Kyle's 5 puppets did not bring him any sense of security. Seeing this, Kyle smiled and asked, Creature, when is your shining moment? Did Mrs. Black arrange you to be with Regulus? And the shining moment of these puppets is when they use their ultimate moves. Puppets, charge, jump, whirlwind. The 5 warriors responded and charged towards the infantry that were coming like a tide. The huge kinetic energy knocked down a group of infantry, then squatted and jumped suddenly. The landing point was chosen to be the place with the largest number of infantry. The shock of landing overturned another group of infantry. This was not over yet. The saw blades on the long sword began to turn with a click, and at the same time, the puppet warrior began to turn his waist, rotating 360 degrees clockwise. This was the ultimate move designed by Kyle for the puppet warrior, whirlwind. At this time, the 5 puppets seemed to have transformed into 5 meat grinders, and corpses were scattered everywhere they passed. The brutal scene in front of him stunned Creature. The originally dangerous siege of the infantry turned out to be a personal show of Kyle's puppet. Kyle could understand Creature's surprise, but he still reminded him, Creature, don't be dazed. You command these 5 puppets, and I will continue to preside over the magic ceremony. Kyle's words woke Creature up. Creature, who was eager to save his master, immediately put away his surprise and took over the command of the puppets. Kyle, on the other hand, put his attention back on the ceremony. At this time, the pattern on the gate was clear for a while, and then it became like a broken mirror. But the overall picture has been located underwater. Taking this opportunity, Kyle also began to observe the underwater situation. Unfortunately, the result gave Kyle a headache. Water ghosts, water monsters, corrupted fishmen, and underwater monsters that Kyle could think of were all here. At the same time, Kyle saw a lot of magic traces in the picture. There were both spells and magic circles. Now Kyle could only pray that the summoning ceremony would succeed. Otherwise, there was only one way left: to break into a trap carefully built by Voldemort. Just thinking about the difficulty made Kyle feel a toothache. Unfortunately, things always develop in the direction that people worry about. The shaking of the screen became more and more intense. but from the intermittent pictures, it can be seen that the perspective is constantly pulling in a huge magic circle. The magic circle is surrounded by a tribe of corrupted fishmen. Something is vaguely floating in the middle of the magic circle. As the perspective pulls in, the thing gradually becomes clear. It is a sphere composed of countless black air. A stream of black air drills in and out, rotating around the thing inside. Kyle has realized what is in the black ball. It is becoming more and more difficult to pull in the perspective, and the frequency of the screen breaking is getting higher and higher. Even the entire door is shaking violently. The summoning magic circle seems to be aware of the current predicament. All the magic runes began to flash a faint light. What a pity. Kyle sighed. Although it seems that the power of the ritual can now compete with the magic circle that trapped Regulus, Kyle knows that the power of the summoning ritual is already a spent force. Sure enough, as the summoning ritual finally broke through the magic circle and successfully located Regulus, the ritual also came to the brink of collapse. As the magic circle flickered, Regulus' figure suddenly appeared on the gate. Regulus' face was pale, as if he was suffering great pain. It can be seen that his body has been completely corroded, and black hair is everywhere, revealing a smell of decay. But the painful expression on his face made Kyle feel relieved. The transformation ritual is indeed not completed. There is a force guarding Regulus' soul. Because the corpses do not feel pain, their expressions are only manic, evil and bloodthirsty. Unfortunately, the picture did not last long. Breaking through the blockade of the transformation magic circle to locate Regulus has exhausted the last bit of power of the summoning ritual. The door in the air flickered violently like a TV without signal, and the surrounding environment seemed to be mourning for the ritual again, and the wind started again. In the end, Regulus's influence was completely shattered, and the door lost all its power and drifted away with the wind. The burning candles went out at the same time, and the magic circle under his feet became tattered as if decades had passed. Kyle sighed. Without turning around, Kyle knew that creature was already in tears. Thanks to the book friend with the last number 2971 for the reward. Thanks to ZS7 and HFL Swordsman for the monthly votes. Thanks to LIUZINGNC, Mengdi, book friend with the last number 8716. Schenk Ferroferric Tetroxide, Soul of the Sky, HFL Swordsman, book friend with the last number 3117. You know Sky, and Yamo wandering for the recommendation votes. Chapter 71 Massacre. The operation to summon Regulus failed completely. This was the simplest way to take him away that Kyle and Black had come up with. What a pity. This ritual was a plan that Kyle and several blacks who were good at magic rituals had discussed for half a semester. Whether it was the magic circle, the sacrificial items, or the spells used, they were all specially designed according to Regulus's special situation. What a pity. Compared with the infernal transformation ritual that had been standing here and absorbing energy for more than 10 years, the energy contained in Kyle's summoning ritual was still too low. Just locating Regulus had reached the limit of the ritual. There was also a subsequent channel opened by breaking the space, snatching Regulus' body from the infernal transformation ritual, and then pulling it over through the space channel. The latter was the biggest energy consumption. In fact, if the magic circle was allowed to run here for a year or two and accumulate some energy, it might be possible. But Regulus couldn't wait that long. Whatever was guarding his soul, the energy was already at the end of its strength. Since the plan to directly summon Regulus had failed, then Kyle had to prepare to force his way into the lake and snatch his body. This was also the second thing Kyle had to do today. Slaughter. No matter what was in the water, bring it to the shore and kill it all. Since he had to go into the water after all, Kyle of course had to try to clean up the things in the water before he officially went into the water. With the failure of the summoning ritual, the boiling lake water had calmed down. The infantry on the shore that had not been chopped up by the warrior puppets also staggered back into the lake. There are currently two known triggering mechanisms for these infantry. One is to drink the potion prepared by Voldemort, which Kyle certainly would not choose. The second is that someone or magic touches the lake water. This is exactly what Kyle is good at. The underage magic restriction order prevents him from holding a wand and casting spells into the lake recklessly. However, he can completely achieve this effect through a magic circle. Kyle has thought a lot, but creature has not yet recovered from the failure just now. To be honest, Kyle really envies Regulus having such loyal subordinates. Although the law clearly stipulates that elves cannot attack wizards. But Kyle believes that if Regulus orders, Creature will not hesitate to do something behind his back. Okay Creature, we have already expected failure before we came here. Why are you still so depressed? After all, he is the most famous dark wizard in history. If it is so easy to succeed, I will doubt whether this is a trap. Kyle's words did not make Creature feel better. He still sobbed from time to time and stood aside dejectedly. But young master, this is the easiest plan. If this plan cannot succeed, the difficulties we have to face will be even greater. Kyle shrugged and said helplessly, Creature, cheer up. Follow me down to prepare the second magic circle. There is no need to be dejected before the final result comes out. After cheering up Creature and waiting for him to stand beside him, Kyle manipulated the iron plate under his feet to fly back to the interior of the frontier base. After getting off the iron plate, Kyle sat in front of the console and said to the command desk, turn on observation mode. That's right, Kyle had built-in voice control function into this puppet. Although it is not smart enough, it is still no problem to command some simple functions of the puppet. As Kyle's voice fell, the walls of the frontier base completely changed. The original silver-white walls with metallic light turned into large screens. The appearance of the frontier base was displayed in real time inside the puppet. Then, Kyle continued to order, prepare the magic cannon. As Kyle's voice fell, the appearance of the frontier base changed again. On the outer wall facing the lake, the wall was cut open, revealing the magic cannon hidden behind it. This is an attempt by Kyle to combine magic with technology. Or the entire frontier base puppet is an attempt by Kyle to combine magic with technology, bringing the advanced concept of technology into magical creations. The final result is the monster of the frontier base. Number 1 magic cannon begins to store energy, aim at the lake, and fire. Following Kyle's order, the gun barrel on the far left of the frontier base began to glow red. In the end, the light seemed to be compressed and squeezed into the gun barrel. Boom. The sound of the magic cannon firing was equally deafening. A sphere that was completely black, but burning with red flames was thrown into the lake. The huge kinetic energy splashed a huge amount of water on the lake surface, and the magic attached to the cannonball caused the cannonball to explode a second time. The huge flames even penetrated the water surface. The dazzling light exposed the cave to the light for the first time. The rocks that had never seen the sun for thousands of years were illuminated by the light for the first time. Kyle's provocation made the entire lake boil. Countless monsters emerged from the lake, roaring and screaming and swimming towards Kyle. What a pity. To get close to Kyle, they have to go through too many levels. First, they have to pass the baptism of 12 magic cannon shells. Then they have to pass the meat-mincing defense line composed of 5 warrior puppets. Even if they are lucky enough to reach the frontier base, it is in vain. They still have to face Kyle's last trump card prepared for these corpses. Monthly ticket benefits are open. Double the monthly tickets, and at the same time reward 1500 points. You will get a monthly ticket, up to 4. Blade does not dare to ask for anything, just a weak request. Thanks to the Dark Knight Starry Sky Viewer, Zazanki, Liu Zion Kuido, Uyi, and the recommendation votes. Chapter 72, Inside and Outside the Cave. The roar in the cave lasted for nearly half an hour. 12 magic cannons kept bombarding the shore. At this time, the bombarded place was already in a mess, with broken arms and limbs everywhere. This was the first time that creatures in the magic world collided with the concept of science and technology. Even if the inferi could not be considered as creatures, the inferi who had luckily crossed the artillery blockade line had to face the siege of 5 puppet warriors. Weird wolves, giants, trolls. These humanoid creatures had already appeared when Voldemort rose to power. It was just after the end of World War II. The world economy was depressed, and people were suffering. With the help of magic, Voldemort could easily find enough living people to make inferi. So no one could guess how many of these evil magic creations were hidden under the Dark Lake. When the summoning ritual failed, Kyle knew that he had to be prepared for a protracted battle in the cave. The last half an hour was just an appetizer. At this time, the magic cannon that had been running continuously for half an hour was already somewhat overwhelmed. Both the magic circuit and the gun barrel were overheated and needed to cool down for a while before they could be used again. Therefore, Kyle controlled the magic cannon and the puppet warriors, strangled the remaining corpses on the shore, and then stopped provoking the lake. Soon, the lake water that was boiling and rolling just now calmed down. Kyle stopped and had nothing to do, called Creature, and asked him to apparate to the island in the lake. He planned to see with his own eyes what Voldemort had arranged on the island. Let's not talk about Kyle's actions in the cave for now. Dumbledore outside the cave has not wasted his time in the past few days. Kyle's counterattack at the year-end dinner was actually within his expectations. His plan had such a big flaw this time, and Slytherin would certainly not let him off easily. Originally, he thought that the first to launch the attack was either himself, Lucius Malfoy, or some powerful adult noble. He never expected that the first shot was fired by two underage children. In particular, one of the children was a freshman in Gryffindor. If it was only Kyle who attacked him, Dumbledore could understand it completely. After all, the attack of the Serpentine House on him was already a traditional program in the British wizarding world. If there was no movement in Slytherin for 2 consecutive years, there were only 2 possibilities. First, Voldemort was really resurrected. Second, the end of the world. But when Hermione questioned him with tears in her eyes and a face full of faith collapse, his expression became gloomy. He was not angry about Hermione's betrayal. Hermione had never been loyal to him, so how could there be betrayal? Not only did Hermione's faith waver, but when Hermione stood up, Dumbledore was also shaken. He had been carrying out the justice he believed in all his life. When he was young, he met Grindelwald for the justice in his heart. Later, he broke up with Grindelwald for the justice in his heart. His vigilance against Voldemort, his confrontation with Voldemort, and all the arrangements made for Voldemort in the 11 years after his disappearance were all for the justice in his heart. But now, his justice was rebuked in person by Gryffindor, whom he trusted the most. This not only shook his foundation in Gryffindor, but also made him doubt his own beliefs. He could not help but start to recall his life and all his choices. He prepared a test of courage for Harry, which would make Harry famous in the Gryffindor camp. He arranged Ron Weasley, who had admired him since childhood, as Harry's roommate. He arranged Hagrid, who he trusted the most, and was also the most innocent, as Harry's magic guide. He threw Harry to the home of a relative who hated and rejected the magic world, and ignored him for 11 years, just to make himself and his men the first warm flame in Harry's life. Just like a chick will regard the first creature it sees as its mother. After breaking out of the shell, he wanted to get Harry's unreserved trust and unreserved worship. So he let Harry be abused by his relatives for 11 years and let him live like a house elf for 11 years. He wanted to get Snape's complete loyalty. He wanted Snape to be the sharpest spear in his hand, become the most hidden and reliable nail he planted beside Voldemort. So, although he was protecting his disciples, his subordinates, James Potter and Lily Potter's family who trusted and admired him the most, he still had to wait until Snape knelt down and begged with tears, and then he asked the question coldly, "What do you want to exchange with me, Severus?" Sure enough, he waited for the answer he expected. "Everything of mine." Note 1. The memories before that were a bit long ago. Because of political reasons, and also because the children of Slytherin were too mature and thoughtful. This made him prefer the lively and innocent Gryffindor. He remembered his favoritism towards Gryffindor over the years. This favoritism made him ignore the bullying of Snape by James and Sirius. After all, Snape was really gloomy and unkempt. How could he compare with the sunny and friendly little one? Because of his preference for Gryffindor. At the same time, it seemed to be for the support of the wealth and power represented by Potter. In order to establish Sirius as an example of abandoning darkness and joining the light, when James and the others made a big mistake, he chose the most despicable means, threatening the victim. This made him choose to stand idly by when James and the other 4 bullied Snape. Over the years, Dumbledore has also read some Muggle books and understood that this is called school violence. He understood that the victim would become inferior, withdrawn and indifferent, and dislike communicating with others. He became afraid of contact with others, lacked self-confidence and security, and some even suffered from psychological disorders such as psychological distortion. An already sensitive child entered a college full of discrimination. Not only was he bullied by classmates in the same college, but he was also bullied by the light he longed for. The teachers around him did not provide him with any shelter, nor did they ever uphold justice for him. In order to protect himself, he had to join an organization that could provide him with shelter. This made him go further and further away from the light. Now think about it, is it entirely his own fault that Snape escaped into the darkness and joined the Death Eaters? If a child in the Muggle world has been subjected to school violence since childhood, in order to protect himself, he joined a society and committed a crime. When this child was in school, he was bullied by the tall, rich and handsome. At the same time, in order to protect the interests of the tall, rich and handsome, the school teachers turned a blind eye to this situation and even threatened the bullied children with accomplices, either endure it or expel you. When such a history is exposed, public opinion will condemn this child, condemning him for self-degradation, associating with gangsters, and finally committing crimes. Or will it criticize the school's teachers for dereliction of duty and presumptuous teachers? But there is no if. This is the magic world. Dumbledore covered it all up. It seems that it was he and James who pushed Snape into the abyss. Recalling this, Dumbledore trembled a little. He couldn't help asking himself, is what he did really right? Because Snape's experience reminded him of the talented student Tom Riddle. Dumbledore couldn't help asking himself, if I had been more patient with Tom, and had not been so wary of him, because of his similarity to Gellert, and if I had not threatened him or rejected him, would Tom not have come to this point? In fact, this thought has appeared in Dumbledore's mind more than once. But time cannot be reversed. His vigilance, rejection, and threats completely pushed Voldemort to the opposite side of himself. If Voldemort was a small figure with mediocre talent, then he could only curse Dumbledore's injustice after drinking. Then when he sobered up, he continued to run around for his 3 meals a day. Unfortunately, Voldemort's talent can be said to be once in 1,000 years. Every time Voldemort grows a little bit, his rejection and vigilance increase a little bit. This makes his opposition with Voldemort seem very natural. Dumbledore is in the light, so Voldemort stepped into the darkness. If Dumbledore could give Voldemort more care during his growth, let him have another way to keep him away from the darkness every time he chooses, would Tom Riddle not have become the Dark Lord today, but the successor of the leader of the White Wizards? Unfortunately, Dumbledore did not give him a chance. Even Snape, Dumbledore did not give him a chance. Thinking of this, Dumbledore could only be thankful that, although Snape's talent was outstanding, it was not as outstanding as Voldemort's. Otherwise, he would have trained another Dark Lord himself. A few days after the year-end dinner, Dumbledore was immersed in such memories. Even the Azkaban riots and Sirius's escape from prison did not make him react. Everything was handed over to McGonagall to deal with. He knew that he had done a lot of wrong things, and a large part of the current situation was caused by him. Unfortunately, the past could not be made up, and he could only re-examine his arrangements to see if there were any loopholes. For Snape, he could only say sorry in his heart. For Harry, he also had to say sorry. He failed James and Lily's trust in him, and watched Harry's miserable childhood. All this is for the greater good. He could only comfort himself in this way. Memories are good things. These days, Dumbledore kept using the pensieve to recall his past. After all, he is already an old man over 100 years old, and there are too many things he can't remember. This forced him to use a pensieve to help himself recall more details. This made him discover that he had made too many mistakes. It also gave him an idea. He would make mistakes, and Voldemort would make mistakes as well. His own memories could help him discover his own mistakes and even weaknesses. So what about Voldemort's memories? Although he couldn't get Voldemort's memories, could he find something by looking at the people associated with Voldemort? Voldemort's weaknesses, the mistakes he had made, and even, could he find some of his hidden cards? For example, how did Voldemort escape death? Dumbledore firmly believed that no one could not make mistakes, and no one could be without weaknesses. These things might be hidden very well by Voldemort, but in his words and deeds, some clues could be found after all. This idea excited Dumbledore. Dumbledore, who was unwilling to argue with magic right now, and decided to put more pressure on the Ministry of Magic, immediately left Hogwarts. After explaining it to McGonagall again, he decided to search for memories related to Voldemort along the trajectory of his growth. Teachers and classmates in the orphanage, students at the same time in Hogwarts, colleagues who worked with him after graduation. The memories of these people will help Dumbledore find Voldemort's weaknesses better. He needs to walk the path Voldemort walked again to find some clues. The first stop is the orphanage, where he first met Voldemort. After apparition to the orphanage, Dumbledore visited the director of the orphanage. At this time, the orphanage had long changed, but Dumbledore got the files of that year through some small tricks. It records in detail the last contact information of the children who were in the orphanage at the same time as Voldemort, as well as the contact information of the old employees of that year. Too much time has passed, and most of the contact information here has expired. But this file did provide Dumbledore with some clues. After arriving at the orphanage, a memory that he had recently recalled with the help of the pensieve emerged. It was the summer of 1938, and he came to this orphanage as a guide. Mrs. Cole, the director at the time, once said to him, "He scares other children. Every summer, we take the children out. Once a year, we take them to the suburbs or the beach." But after returning from one time, Amy Benson and Dennis Bishop were always a little strange. When we asked, they only said that they had entered a cave with Tom Riddle. Tom swore that they were going on an adventure, but something must have happened in there. I can be sure of that. There are many other things, strange and weird. Standing at the door of the orphanage, this memory emerged. Just take it as the first step to find Tom's traces, Dumbledore told himself. Although the records in the file are old, fortunately, Dumbledore finally found a little girl from that year. Now more than 50 years have passed. But the outing organized by the orphanage at that time was one of the few opportunities for those children to go out and play. This made the girl remember the location of the beach deeply. Even every few years, she would take her family back to that beach for vacation. Thanks to the guidance of the old lady, Dumbledore found the beach of that year smoothly and knew the location of the cave. It seems that Voldemort intended to establish his authority, and the matter of the two little boys was known to everyone in the orphanage. Dumbledore came to the beach while walking, recalling the evil that Voldemort showed in his childhood. What a pity. I just threatened him and showed him the right to speak brought by powerful power, but I never really told him what to do. Although he knew that thinking like this was futile, Dumbledore still couldn't help feeling regretful. Finally, Dumbledore walked to the side of the huge rock. Coincidentally, the place where Dumbledore stood was where Carl and Creature once stood. Voldemort once built a shielding magic circle in the cave to prevent wizards from discovering the magic fluctuations in the cave. This made Dumbledore not notice Kyle at the first time. Dumbledore stood on the rock, looking at the seawater. Kyle on the island was looking at the stone basin filled with potions. There was only a section of seawater and a wall between the two. It seemed that meeting was inevitable. Note 1. The original text here is as follows. D. What can you give me in return, Severus? What can you give me in return, Severus? S. Anything. Anything. I have always liked Dumbledore. After all, he is a bright, interesting and powerful cute old man. After all, when I first watched HP, Blade was only a teenager and had no brain. It was not until I saw this sentence that I realized Dumbledore's cruelty for the first time. It was also this description that made Blade the lifelong black of old Dumbledore. I began to reflect on his indulgence in school violence, his disregard for Harry's abuse, and so on. In fact, Blade sometimes thinks that Naruto has plagiarized HP in terms of setting. After all, Naruto's experience is too similar to Harry Potter. Dumbledore and the third generation both watched the protagonist being abused, and then became the first light in the protagonist's life. They were both wary and cautious, and finally forced a powerful affiliated camp to rebel. The protagonist is also naive and works hard for Lib. Naruto is completely brainwashed by the will of fire, and Harry regards Dumbledore's words as holy words. Did Kishimoto's early inspiration come from HP? Blade seems to have discovered something. Chapter 73, Mist. Dumbledore had learned the location of the cave from the elderly lady. I actually went to the cave secretly later to have a look. The lady said. It used to be a small village, but in recent years, it has developed into a small town. It is next to the cliff, and the sea is below the cliff. Looking down from the edge of the town, you can see a huge rock. I have never figured out how they, just children, could get to such a far place. I have seen from a distance that there is a huge crack on the rock. It is said that Tom took the two children to the cave in the crack to adventure. Recalling these words, Dumbledore stared at the huge rock in the distance. It was pitch black there, and only waves could be seen hitting it from time to time. On the edge of the cliff, there were many jagged grooves that could be climbed, leading to the giant pebbles below that were half exposed to the sea around the cliff. Climbing down from here is very dangerous. But Dumbledore did not hesitate and began to climb down swiftly. He did not use magic, but climbed up completely relying on physical strength. Dumbledore had no choice but to be careful. Voldemort had not yet resurrected, which made the situation somewhat complicated. In terms of strength, Dumbledore was stronger than Voldemort. But now Dumbledore was in the light, while Voldemort was in the dark. If Voldemort released a detection spell in the place where he once lived or valued, it would alert the enemy. Dumbledore's arms tightly grasped the rock. Although old, they were still full of strength. From a distance, no one would have thought that this was an old man over 100 years old. The rocks at the bottom were slippery after being washed by the seawater. He could even feel the cold water with the smell of the sea flying up and splashing on his face. Finally, he came down to the giant pebble closest to the front of the cliff, and Dumbledore squatted on it. The sunlight was not good at this time, which made the sea surface a few meters below him look even deeper and more terrifying. Looking around, Dumbledore focused his attention on the dark rock wall beside him. Dumbledore saw the crack that the old lady mentioned, and the dark sea water was swirling inside. He slid gently from the pebble into the seawater and swam towards the dark crack on the rock surface. Just like Kyle's choice just now, he held the wand in his mouth. This distance was not far. Soon, Dumbledore came to the antechamber of the cave. He climbed the steps leading to the antechamber with great effort, and water rushed down from his wet clothes. The air around was silent and cold. Although Dumbledore was quite strong, he still couldn't help shivering. He looked around vigilantly at first, and then breathed a sigh of relief, because he found that, although there was a huge magic circle in the antechamber, he simply identified it, and found that this magic circle did not seem to involve detection and alarm. After finding that there were no other traces of magic around, Dumbledore first used a drying spell. This made his clothes dry and warm, as if they had been hung in front of a blazing fire. Then he released the fluorescent flash, and began to observe the magic circle. At this time, Dumbledore and Kyle, one in the cave and the other outside the cave, were separated by a wall. The two had different purposes, but they both stopped, and began to study the magic works left by Voldemort. Although the shielding magic concealed Kyle's magic fluctuations, it also blocked his perception and he did not notice that there was a new guest in the cave. With the help of Creature, they apparated to the island in the lake. The island was not large, only about 30 square meters. A large flat black stone slab was empty, with only the light source emitting the green light. Now that he looked closer, the green light seemed much brighter. Kyle squinted at the green light. At first, he thought it was a magic lamp. Then he saw that the green light came from the stone basin containing the potion. The stone basin was extremely rough, with a base underneath. Kyle even saw the scratches left when the stone basin was carved. Kyle approached the stone basin, and Creature followed. They stood side by side, looking into the stone basin. A basin full of emerald green liquid, emitting a glittering phosphorescent light. "Young master, do you know what kind of potion this is?" Creature asked softly. "I'm not sure," Kyle said, "but it's obviously something more terrifying than blood and corpses." Kyle shook the sleeves of his robe upwards and stretched his slender fingertips to the surface. "Young master, no, don't touch it. I can't touch it." Kyle smiled faintly. "See? My hand can't reach forward any further. You try it." Creature stared and stretched his hand to the stone basin, trying to touch the liquid. But he encountered an invisible resistance, and his hand could not get close to the liquid. No matter how hard he stretched his hand down, His fingers seemed to touch the hard and indestructible air. It's a spell, creature. It's obvious that the mysterious person has cast a lot of spells on this potion. Kyle stretched out his wand and made some complicated movements on the surface of the liquid, muttering something silently, but did not cast any magic. Young master? Creature was obviously puzzled by Kyle's behavior and looked at Kyle worriedly. Obviously, he was afraid that Kyle would be silently affected by Voldemort's spell. On the contrary, Kyle was in a good mood. I'm fine, creature. This is really a treasure. As long as you are strong enough and careful enough, you can learn a lot of unique things from the mysterious man here. When explaining to creature, Kyle was always smiling. Although it is indeed dangerous here, if you are not careful, you will trigger the spell left by Voldemort. But Kyle believes that, as long as he has the ability to break these spells, his gains will definitely be beyond imagination. Creature, I remember you said that it was after your little master drank the potion that the pendant box appeared. Kyle's words made creature a little sad, and the scene from more than 10 years ago appeared in front of him again. He has never forgotten this scene for a minute. Yes, young master, at that time, Master Regulus made a fake ornament box and put it inside and left a note. Seeing creature's excitement, Kyle scratched his head and finally said, okay, creature, let's hurry up and rescue Regulus. Maybe you can meet your little master again. Kyle stared at the stone basin for a long time and finally took 2 steps back. Let's go back to work and try to rescue Regulus as soon as possible. After a pause, he continued, there's no rush for this stone basin, just put it here first. This is the magic center of the entire cave. Let's study it at the end. After saying that, he directed creature to take him back to the shore. At the same time, Dumbledore outside the wall had also studied the magic circle on the wall. He walked closer to the cave wall and touched it with his fingertips. He whispered something in a strange language. Dumbledore walked around the cave twice from the left, touching the rough cave wall as much as possible while walking. Occasionally he stopped and used his fingers to feel around a certain place. Finally, he stopped and pressed his palm flat against the cave wall. After his palm rested on the cave wall for a long time, Dumbledore stepped back a few steps and pointed his wand at the rock. Suddenly, the outline of an arch appeared there, emitting a dazzling white light, as if there was a strong light behind the crack. The appearance of the magic arch made Dumbledore's expression more solemn, but there was a hint of helplessness in his expression. Obviously, his first attempt caught Voldemort's tail. Unfortunately, it's not the time yet. Dumbledore sighed in his heart. The chaos in the magic world made Dumbledore not take risks easily. After sacrificing blood to the magic circle, his condition would inevitably be greatly reduced. No one knew what kind of danger was in the cave behind the door. This forced him to choose to stop this exploration. Dumbledore narrowed his eyes, and the figure of his capable subordinate flashed in his mind. Severus Snape. Dumbledore, who had made up his mind, put down his wand. He stared at the archway flashing with strong light for a long time. Finally, he made up his mind and apparated back to Hogsmeade, which was the closest place to Hogwarts. Thanks to Kuido and Yangxing for their awards, thanks to Tschen, Liuxi and Xianxi, I just make a random complaint, the Windsword and the Windrider, and I will definitely come back for their monthly votes. Thanks to Weeking, Book Friend Suffix 6250, Zuan Fuishuiu, Mumiahuamu, Yuiashaliu, Yuhan Yuan Shishianzan, Just a Passerby, you is very embarrassed, August, Kuido. Book Friend Suffix 0177, Langai Ushuanwu, 8 is Enjoy Loneliness, Axuan X, and Yan thanking for their recommendation votes. Chapter 74, The Ministry of Magic's Dilemma. While Kyle was leisurely consuming the corpses in the lake, the wizarding world had become nervous. It was not that Azkaban had not had inmate riots. After all, the most insane and evil dark wizards in the entire English peninsula were imprisoned there. Aurors and strikers were used to these prisoners making some noise from time to time. They would even make bets on who could guess the time of the next riot. But this time was different. This riot originated from the Death Eaters in the deepest part of Azkaban. They were Voldemort's most loyal subordinates. Before Voldemort disappeared, these guys were all his most insane minions. Cruel, evil, crazy, all the negative words you can think of can be applied to these Death Eaters. Their loyalty to Voldemort is beyond doubt. Those who are fence-sitters or cunning guys have already used their means to escape trial. Only these most reckless, most upright, or most brainless guys will be imprisoned here for 11 years. So when Fudge heard that these crazy guys were all shouting that their master was back, he panicked. Dumbledore might use Voldemort as a cover to cover up his mistakes. The nobles might use Voldemort as a cover to intimidate their enemies. Only these prisoners who had lost their minds would not do that. That was their belief and the destination of their souls. For these prisoners, if there really was a god, then God must be Voldemort. No one believed that they would use Voldemort as an excuse to make trouble. Since they shouted like this, it must mean that Voldemort is back. The Ministry of Magic had a very difficult time during this period. Not only did they have to face the pressure of Voldemort's comeback, but they also had to deal with the criticism of public opinion. Before, they publicly mocked Dumbledore in the newspapers as an old fool. How happy they were at that time, how embarrassed they are now. Although Fudge, who got the news, ran to Hogwarts as soon as he rolled and crawled and learned that Voldemort had not been resurrected. But this did not make Fudge feel relieved, because Sirius Black, Voldemort's most loyal subordinate, escaped from prison. Whenever Fudge thought of this, he could not sleep or eat. Sirius Black was undoubtedly one of the most cunning, calmest and most terrifying Death Eaters. Think about Sirius Black's glorious achievements, lurking beside Dumbledore for countless years, and being regarded by him as his most trusted subordinate. This is enough to show his cunning. Now, such a powerful and cunning guy has returned to Voldemort's side. How can Fudge feel at ease? It is difficult to resurrect a person, but it does not seem to be so difficult for powerful nobles. And those powerful nobles are almost all potential Death Eaters. Fudge knows clearly how many of them escaped the trial. Because Fudge is one of those who made a fortune by taking advantage of the post-war liquidation. He was just a small fry back then, and he could not get much oil from the nobles. But back then, he did not need to face the pressure of the Dark Lord's comeback. If Fudge had known that one day he would be the minister and face the return of the Dark Lord, he would have exposed all those who had received bribes from the nobles. Unfortunately, there is no if. Fudge has to bear all the sins he committed in the past with tears. Since Sirius escaped from prison, Fudge has not returned home once, and even sleeps in the office at night. This is certainly not because Fudge is working day and night. It is because the Ministry of Magic is guarded by auras 24 hours a day. These days, the Ministry of Magic has been holding meetings and actions. Fudge agreed to the Aura Director's proposal to expand the recruitment almost immediately. Then he met with the Prime Minister of the Muggle world and informed him of the extremely dangerous criminals on the run. Now, whether in the Muggle world or the Magic world, Sirius's wanted posters are posted all over the streets. Unfortunately, so many days have passed and no useful clues have been received. This made Fudge suspect that the Dark Lord and Sirius had already hidden in the manner of a noble. Auras have to guard the Prime Minister of the Muggle world, Diagon Alley, Hogsmeade, the Ministry of Magic, and even Hogwarts. It seems that all wizard gathering places are asking for more auras. This makes the Ministry of Magic increasingly stretched. So when a subordinate suggested that Dementors be arranged to replace auras, Fudge was almost immediately tempted. Unfortunately, this suggestion was immediately sentenced to death by Scrimgeour, and he scolded the staff who made this suggestion. The head aura directly told Fudge to give up this idea, because evil creatures such as giants, werewolves, and Dementors have all served under the Dark Lord. Scrimgeour even told Fudge that if he didn't want Azkaban to have any more trouble, he would also need to send more people there. At least he had to ensure that information could be transmitted to the Ministry of Magic at the first time of the incident. Scrimgeour's words made Fudge even more helpless. If he had to add more people to Azkaban, the number of auras and strikers would be even less. Do I really have to do that, Dumbledore? Is he waiting for me to beg him? A certain thought appeared in Fudge's mind again and again. The current dilemma forced Fudge to think of Dumbledore. Perhaps now only Dumbledore can help him. But this idea made Fudge feel unwilling. It doesn't matter if he surrenders to Dumbledore and admits his mistakes. After all, Fudge didn't lose anything because he just failed to achieve the goal of suppressing Dumbledore. But after being afraid of Dumbledore for so long, Fudge now wants him to take the initiative, to make suggestions that will lead to a surge in Dumbledore's power. This is definitely not what Fudge wants to see. The Dark Lord is indeed terrible. But in Fudge's eyes, Dumbledore, who may replace him at any time, is also his biggest worry. Chapter 75 Return to number 505. The exploration of the cave has entered a stable period. After Kyle told Creature to manipulate the puppets to clean up the inferi, he went to the site to study Voldemort's magic. Traces of magic can be found everywhere in the lake and on the island. Confusion, control, attack. There are many kinds of magic. The water of the entire lake was cursed by Voldemort. Even if a drop of lake water was on your body, it would be marked by his magic and become the target of the inferi. In addition, Kyle did not dare to use magic outside of school, which led to his research progress very slowly. In the end, Kyle bowed his head to reality and did not want to study Voldemort's posthumous works. He honestly picked up the big books and started to read. Before you reach adulthood, don't think about studying spells during the holidays. It took 5 days for Kyle. No, it should be Creature to clean up the inferi in the lake. After all, whether it is a puppet or a magic cannon, it has to stop and cool down for a while after working for a period of time. This caused Creature's work efficiency to be low. In fact, Creature was also quite strange. He was the one who operated, the one who manipulated the puppet, and the one who was on guard against the surrounding situation. What was the young master doing here? House elves are all simple. After thinking about this question, Creature asked Kyle directly, but his statement was more tactful. Young master, Creature is enough in the cave. You might as well study at home. Creature will prepare drinks and desserts for you. How can that be? Rescuing Regulus is the first adventure I have participated in. Of course I have to follow here throughout the whole process, so that there is a sense of ritual. Sense of ritual? Young master, are you performing any magic ritual? Kyle. This conversation ended in vain. In the end, Creature did not figure out what magic ritual the young master was performing, but it looked very important. However, Creature's words did remind Kyle that at this stage, there was really no need to stay in the cave all the time. So the next day, Kyle asked Creature to clear out the inferi by himself. And he himself, after choosing a suitable set of muggle clothes, walked to number 505, Islington. Knock, knock, knock. Who is this? The little witch answered and opened the door. Her voice was cheerful, without the depression she had when they last met at Hogwarts. Senior Kyle, why are you here? The little witch who opened the door was obviously surprised. She obviously did not expect Kyle to come. Before Kyle could answer, another girl in the room said, Hermione, who is outside the door. It's Senior Kyle, Mom. At this time, Hermione also let Kyle into the room. Mr. Granger, Madam, good morning. Kyle's voice was neither fast nor slow, with a hint of cheerfulness and steadiness. Kyle was very good at grasping the tone and demeanor. After all, he was a 30-year-old adult man who traveled through time and space to become an 11-year-old kid. This forced him to spend some time observing and imitating the demeanor and movements of other children. Since it was a performance, Kyle would of course imitate the best. This made his demeanor absolutely the best among his age group. Mr. Granger and the others were also surprised by Kyle's visit, but they still warmly welcomed his arrival. In order to prevent the two from making too many guesses and causing any misunderstandings, Kyle told the excuse for this visit not long after he sat down. After all, Kyle had been misunderstood when he stayed at Mr. Granger's house during Easter, and the couple thought that Kyle had feelings for Hermione. Mr. Granger, Hermione told me at the dinner that she had some questions for the second grade to ask me. I happened to pass by number 505 today, so I came in to visit. I hope I didn't disturb you. Kyle was right. Mr. Granger was wondering about the reason for Kyle's visit. As a parent, Mr. Granger's daughter was of course excellent and cute. Although Hermione explained to them last time that Kyle lived in his house because he misunderstood that there was danger. But in fact, this excuse did not completely convince the Grangers. After all, in their eyes, Kyle was just a 4th-year student. What danger could be worth his abnormality? The Grangers had also been to Diagon Alley, which was indeed very magical, just like a scene from a fairy tale that had entered reality. but if you ignore the magic of magic, it is actually no different from an ordinary pedestrian street in the Muggle world. The little wizards were either chasing and playing, or crying and asking their parents to buy them the toys they liked. The adults were busy bargaining, and the overall atmosphere was very harmonious. As for Hogwarts, they heard many stories about Hogwarts from their daughter. It was really a magical castle, with friendly ghosts, naughty stairs, and respected professors. In their daughter's mouth, Hogwarts was a big and happy family. Since the atmosphere in the magic world was so good, Kyle's behavior seemed a little suspicious. Now Kyle came to the door again, and he explained that he was tutoring Hermione. The Grangers were convinced, especially Mr. Granger. He felt that he had seen through everything, and was very satisfied. Little guy, these are all the leftovers from my play in the past, and you still want to fool me? You are still a little tender. The proud Mr. Granger glanced at his wife, and found that his wife was also looking at him. He immediately understood that his wife had also seen through everything. Looking at Kyle, who was sitting calmly on the sofa opposite him, and pretending to drink tea, and Hermione, who looked a little unnatural, Mr. Granger decided not to reveal all this. He just followed Kyle's words and said, Hermione has been strong since she was a child. As soon as she came back from vacation, she went to buy second grade books. She must have questions to ask these days. Then Kyle, you can review your homework with Hermione first. We won't disturb you too. Stay for lunch at noon. Mr. Granger's voice was full of laughter. Looking at my daughter's attitude, she is also very satisfied with Kyle. Maybe the two of them had secretly fallen in love when they met last time. Mr. Granger thought happily. Over the years, the couple always worried that Hermione would grow up to be a nerd and finally find a good home. Unexpectedly, after only 1 year at Hogwarts, there would be such a big change. Hogwarts is really a good place. This was Mr. Granger's biggest sigh in his heart. Kyle certainly saw the performance of the Grangers, but he couldn't figure out the reason for their weirdness. After the two left, Kyle sat on the sofa with a little relaxation. Hermione, are Mr. and Mrs. Granger dissatisfied with me? Why do I feel so strange just now? Kyle's question made Hermione speechless. She could only look at him strangely, and opened her mouth, not knowing what to say. Seeing that Kyle didn't look like a fake, she could only casually say, Senior Kyle, it's such a nice day, why didn't you go to accompany your girlfriend? Hermione's words made Kyle feel even more strange, but he still replied, I have been busy studying magic all these years, how can I have time to find a girlfriend? I have never dated a girl. This is a big truth. Kyle has been a solo since his mother's womb in his previous life. After crossing over, he was busy studying magic and never spared time to think about this issue. Could it be that Hermione likes me and told her parents? This thought made Kyle a little troubled. Hermione was a research assistant that he was very optimistic about. She had a strong rational thinking and excellent magic talent. This made him start to think, if he rejected Hermione rashly, would the relationship between the two sides deteriorate and affect his plan? Oh, woman. Hermione, who was sitting next to him, also had a headache. Senior Kyle didn't understand what was going on. It turns out he has no experience. But it's a good thing that Senior didn't see what Mom and Dad were thinking, otherwise it would be so embarrassing. Thinking of this, Hermione glanced at Kyle secretly. Seeing that he was still in distress, she hurriedly said, Senior Kyle, you haven't told me what you want to see me for. Is there anything you need my help with? Thanks to Fields and Sunsets and the Emperor's Unknown Old Years for their awards. Thanks to Yuju, Holy Light, Revisiting Y, Shoes in Kangi, and Lunara for their monthly tickets. Thanks to Buried Summer Memories, Watching You in the Sea, Fan Collection, Zoo and Feishu, Big Pancake HCWDL, Yuju, Gamut, When the False Becomes True, The True is Also False, Ice Watermelon, Thinking Piglet, Wedding, Zeji Chensha, Mengyu Shang, Think About It Yourself Later at WWW, Call You to Drink Under the Peach Blossoms, Taishang Ren, Masturbating Every Night, Wu Xiaobao 2. In the other side, Writing Mountains and Seas, and The End of the Night Watchman for their recommendation votes. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like, Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.